We're all set, Matt.
Great, everybody. Welcome. I would like to call our June 5th, 2020 regular meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of
America
and
to
to
the
the
republic
for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty,
liberty,
Justice.
and justice for all.
Amen.
All right, our first item, we're going to, since it's been a little while, as you know, we're going to go in the order that we've been going for the council members in terms of commentary and then calling the vote. So the first item is the approval of the minutes. That's our, is there a motion to approve the March 30th, 2020 special meeting minutes?
So moved, Jill Lawler.
Is there a second?
Richard Lima, second.
All right, all in favor, we'll start with Mr. Lima,
Richard Lima, aye.
Mr. Murray,
Patrick Murray, aye.
Mr. Pugh,
Jesse Pugh, aye.
Ms. Lawler,
Lawler, aye.
Matt Mannix, aye. Motion approved 5-0. I haven't had a chance to pick up the executive session minutes, so we're going to move on to the motion to approve the April 29th, 2020 consolidated special meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve that?
Jill Lawler, so moved.
Is there a second?
Richard Lima, second.
All in favor? We'll start with Mr. Lima.
Richard Lima, aye.
Mr. Murray,
Patrick Murray, aye.
Mr. Pugh,
Jesse Pugh, aye.
Ms. Lawler,
Jill Lawler, aye.
Matt Mannix, aye. Motion approved 5-0. Next, we have our consent agenda. Do any council members have an item that they wish to remove from the consent agenda? I'll start with Mr. Lima,
I have none.
Mr. Murray,
All set.
Mr. Pugh,
All set here.
Ms. Lawler.
None, thank you.
All right, so is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Jill Lawler, so moved.
Is there a second?
Richard Lima, second.
All right, all in favor, starting with Mr. Lima.
Richard Lima, aye.
I'm sorry, Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Pugh,
Jesse Pugh, aye.
Ms. Lawler,
Jill Lawler, aye.
Matt Mannix, aye. The consent agenda approved 5-0. Item number 4 is a motion to approve the purchase of one new 2021 custom-built Ferrara pumper from Ferrara Fire Apparatus Incorporated through Bulldog Fire Apparatus Incorporated in the total amount of $598,000 using the HGAC buy program. Is there a motion?
Jill Lawler, so moved.
Is there a second?
Richard Lima, second.
All right, any commentary from the council? We'll start with Mr. Lima.
Just so the chief could speak in on this, Chief Partington, if you could just explain to the members that are listening in the council that the year of the apparatus, this is actually replacing. So people have an idea of, you know, we're trying to get these buying programs in where every so many years we'll start to replace apparatus and equipment that's needed in this town. And if you could just highlight on that for me a little bit.
Sure. Good evening. I hope you can hear me okay. This was a project that started really in fiscal year 18-19. This is funding a current 23-year-old pumper that is currently our active reserve piece. It's 23 years old. It's a 1997. It's got it's got about 173,000 miles on it currently. And it's time to retire this piece. What this will allow us to do will rotate our current engine 2 into a active reserve mode. That's a 2005 vehicle. And that's recently, well, a couple of years ago, it's undergone a rather large engine renovation work to it. So we anticipate having quite a few more years left for that within a active reserve role. So traditionally you get about 20 years out of a pumper, 10 years active, another 5 years in an active reserve role, and another 5 years following that in a reserve role. We traditionally don't leave a piece in a reserve role. Our reserve pumpers are in an active reserve mode. So that means if one piece goes out of service, the other one is actively ready to go in its place. So traditionally, it's been about 20 years, and it's time to rotate the piece out.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Murray.
So Ricky, are you gonna be expanding your fleet at the next election?
Yeah, I got 7 of them now, and I got
Oh,
some Army
okay.
tankers coming in, just in case, backup.
Now that you have a pumper. Yeah, I guess, well, let's hear from everybody else. I'm a standing
Mr.
by.
Pugh. Mr.
Nope.
Pugh.
No comments.
Ms. Lawler.
The chief answered all my questions. Thank you.
All right, any commentary from the public? Ask the moderator.
No hands raised.
All right, so I'm going to final commentary from the council. Mr. Lima, any final comments?
No final comment. Thank you, Chief.
Mr. Murray,
All set.
Mr. Pugh,
No comments.
all right, Ms. Lawler,
Nothing further.
thank you. All right, so I'm going to call the vote, starting with Mr. Lima.
Richard Lima, aye.
Mr. Murray,
Patrick Murray, aye.
Mr. Pugh,
Jesse Pugh, aye.
Ms. Lawler,
Jill Lawler, aye.
Matt Mannix, aye. Motion approved 5-0. Item 5 is a motion to approve the contractual agreement between the town of Narragansett and James Harris to perform plumbing and mechanical inspections for the building officials office from July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021. Is there a motion?
Jill Lawler, so moved.
Is there a second?
Richard Lima, second.
All right, discussion. We'll start. Any initial comments from the council? We'll start with Mr. Lima.
I have no comments at this time.
Mr. Murray,
Yeah, all set.
Mr. Pugh,
No comments.
Ms. Lawler.
I'm fine with it. Thank you.
All right, and we're gonna, anybody from the public, I'm gonna ask the moderator.
Nobody from the public.
All right, great. And this is the annual contractual agreement with with our plumber and mechanic for inspections. All in favor, we'll start with Mr. Lima.
Richard Lima, aye.
Mr. Murray,
Murray, aye.
Mr. Pugh,
Jesse Pugh, aye.
Ms. Lawler,
Lawler, aye.
Matt Mannix, aye. Motion approved 5-0. Item 6 is a motion to approve the contractual agreement between the town of Narragansett and Anthony Wojcik to perform electrical inspections for the building officials office from July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021. Any initial comments from the council, starting with Mr. Lima?
I have none. Thank you.
Matt, can I move the motion?
Thank you.
Yep, I'll move the motion. Jill Lawler.
Jill Lawler moves the motion. Is there a second?
Is Richard Lima, second.
Thank you. All right, initial comments from the council, starting with Mr. Lima.
I have none.
Mr. Murray,
All set.
Mr. Pugh,
No comment.
Ms. Lawler.
I'm all set. Thanks.
Okay, and now we'll, anyone from the public, I'll ask the moderator.
Nobody from the public.
Okay, all in favor, starting with Mr. Lima.
Richard Lima, aye.
Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Pugh,
Jesse Pugh, aye.
Ms. Lawler.
Jill Lawler, aye.
Matt Mannix, aye. Motion approved 5-0. Item 7 is a motion to approve the police department's request to hire one new probationary public safety dispatcher clerk. Is there a motion?
Jill Lawler, so moved.
Is there a second?
Richard Lima, second.
All right, any initial comments from the council, starting with Mr. Lima?
Richard Lima, none.
Mr. Murray,
All set.
Mr. Pugh,
Just my only comment, just for the public, is that this is a hire to replace an anticipated vacancy in July 2020. So it is a new clerk, but it's for an existing position. So no questions. Just wanted to mention that.
Ms. Lawler.
Yeah, so as just said, there's not an additional hire, it's a potential replacement. So I'm fine with this. Thank you.
And I think we should be looking at all these positions as we've gone through coronavirus, because we have a policy where a new position, we do have to approve before the town manager starts the process. All right, any commentary from the public? I'll ask the moderator.
Nothing from the public.
All right, so I'm going to call the vote on this. We'll start with Mr. Lima.
Richard Lima, aye.
Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Pugh,
Jesse Pugh, aye.
Ms. Lawler.
Jill Lawler, aye.
Matt Mannix, aye. Motion approved 5-0. Item number 8 is a motion to approve the plumbing services and supplies for the installation of hands-free sensors and valves in the 2 South Pavilion restrooms of the town beach to be completed by Stedman and Company Plumbing and Heating Incorporated in the amount of $12,196. Is there a motion?
Jill Lawler, so moved.
Is there a second?
Richard Lima, second.
Council discussion. It's a Parks and Rec Department item. We'll start with Mr. Lima.
So just like to let the public know that, again, this is for the beach enterprise fund, so it does not come out of taxpayer funds. It's strictly beach enterprise. And it's part of their regular maintenance and budgeting that they do. So I'm glad to see that they're on top of things.
Mr. Murray.
Yeah, how many sinks is that covered, Steve?
Well, it's toilets, sinks, urinals, and everything. It's
Oh, the whole package. Okay, that's fine. That's,
our biggest concern.
that'll work.
Our biggest concern is that, like the North Pavilion, which was refurbished and renovated right after Hurricane Sandy, that's all touchless. And now with COVID, it's highlighted our concerns that we really need to do the same thing in the South Pavilion.
Sure. Understood.
Mr. Pugh.
Yeah, I think it's great that this is getting done, especially during this time. Steve, do you have a timeline for when this is going to actually get installed?
We're hoping to get it done as soon as possible. We just have to schedule it. If upon your approval, we'll get Stedman in there as soon as possible. They're pretty flexible, and we can. It's a pretty easy fix. So I think we can get them in there hopefully in July.
Great. All right, cool. Thanks.
Ms. Lawler.
The only question I have, and I'm not sure if it's for Steve or for Chris, is there any type of refundable for the COVID for this?
I can answer that. I've already put that in through Reamer, and right now they've told us it isn't eligible, but we're going to still try. I think I've asked Chris that before, and we'll try that again. If it's eligible down the road, we'll put it in again.
Great, thank you.
And we'll be talking more about that question on item number 10. All right, I'm gonna ask the moderator if there's anyone from the public.
Nobody from the public.
All right, all in favor, starting with Mr. Lima.
Richard Lima, aye.
Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Pugh,
Jesse Pugh, excuse me, Jesse Pugh, aye.
Ms. Lawler.
Jill Lawler, aye.
Matt Mannix, aye. Motion approved 5-0. Item 9 is a motion to approve, ratify, and confirm the pavement restoration work associated with various new water service installations and water main break repairs by George Sherman Sand and Gravel Company Incorporated in the amount of $13,632. Is there a motion?
Jill Lawler, so moved.
Is there a second?
Richard Lima, second.
Initial comments from the council, starting with Mr. Lima. This item comes from the engineering department.
I have none at this time.
Mr. Murray,
None. All set.
Mr. Pugh,
No questions.
Ms. Lawler.
No questions.
Some of this work is being done at Angel Road. Is there any commentary from the public? I'll ask the moderator.
Nothing from the public.
All right, so I'm going to call the vote. All in favor, starting with Mr. Lima,
Richard Lima, aye.
Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Pugh,
Jesse Pugh, aye.
Ms. Lawler,
Jill Lawler, aye.
Matt Mannix, aye. Motion approved 5-0. Item 10 is a motion to approve the professional services contract with GZA Geo-Environmental Incorporated and a partner iParametrics for disaster recover administrative services for COVID-19 in amount not to exceed $14,816 and authorize the town manager to sign the contract after review by the town solicitor. Is there a motion?
Jill Lawler, so moved.
Is there a second?
Richard Lima, second.
Discussion on this item. If the finance director or the town manager wants to provide a brief summary, if anyone feel free to do so, because this is related to what's going on with the coronavirus and the reimbursement.
Yes, I can give you something. Thank you.
Thank you.
TCA, that's in front of you. You have the service agreement, terms and condition of the contract, and the task order and pricing of 14,000 and change. These expenditures are 100% reimbursable through FEMA, up to 5% of the total cost of submitted for reimbursement. They have a very high quality staff and team for an organization. They have worked for over 60 presidential declared disasters with FEMA and public assistance. They've supported FEMA mission planning operations, and they manage the entire process. They start with a kickoff meeting. They go through the request for reimbursements, through appeals and arbitration, all the way through closing out the project. And they're very knowledgeable about the grants portal, which has changed a little bit, especially with this COVID situation, and also other funding sources such as CDBG. So they won't just work with FEMA. They'll try to get all our expenses covered through other funding opportunities. If it doesn't go through FEMA, they will look for other sources, whether it's the CARES Act money or CDBG or whatever else is available out there. It's a very cumbersome task, and I think Chief Partington can help with that. Judy's been doing a lot of the work, and Erin with Mike DeChico and Stacy with the police. They've been putting in a lot of time and effort. So we have a lot of the documentation there. It's just putting it all together and knowing if it will qualify or not.
Great. That was my understanding of this was it's not just for the FEMA reimbursement, the corona crisis, there's opportunities for other reimbursement with, as you said, with block grants and other types of grants. So I'm going to get initial commentary from the council, starting with Mr. Lima.
I have no comment.
I'm going to go to Mr. Murray.
All set.
Mr. Pugh,
No comments.
Ms. Lawler.
Just a quick question for Jim. Jim, I know you're going to reach out to a couple of the towns that have utilized this service before. Were you able to know, and what was their feedback?
Mayor Fung from Cranston is pleased with them. Ralph Mollis from North Kingstown is pleased. I have not spoken to the city of Providence yet, but Mayor Fung's got a great deal of experience in dealing with disasters and whatnot. And he and Ralph Mollis are happy with them.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask the moderator if there's anybody from the public.
Nobody from the public.
All right, so I'm going to call the vote on this. We'll start with Mr. Lima,
Richard Lima, aye.
Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Pugh,
Jesse Pugh, aye.
Ms. Lawler,
Lawler, aye.
Matt Mannix, aye. Motion approved 5-0. Item 11 is a motion to approve eviction license application for Bucktown Gansett LLC, doing business as Dockside Provisions, 294 Great Island Road, Narragansett, Rhode Island, subject to local and state regulations. Is there a motion?
Jill Lawler, so moved.
Is there a second?
Richard Lima, second.
Initial commentary from the council, starting with Mr. Lima.
I have none at this time.
Mr. Murray,
All set.
Mr. Pugh,
All set.
Ms. Lawler.
No comments.
And I'm going to ask the moderator if there's anyone from the public.
No one from the public.
All right, so I'm going to call the vote on this for item 11. All in favor, starting with Mr. Lima,
Richard Lima, aye.
Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Pugh,
Jesse Pugh, aye.
Ms. Lawler.
Jill Lawler, aye.
Matt Mannix, aye. Motion approved 5-0. Item 12 is a motion to approve a mobile food establishment license application for Mark Mauricio doing business as the Cupcakery LLC, subject to local and state regulations. Is there a motion?
Jill Lawler, so moved.
Is there a second?
Richard Lima, second.
Discussion, initial comments from the council, starting with Mr. Lima.
No comments.
Mr. Murray,
All set.
Mr. Pugh,
No comments.
Ms. Lawler.
No comment.
This, and I'm going to ask the clerk to correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a food truck, but it's not one of the food trucks for the beach. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Any comment from the public? I'm going to ask the moderator.
No one from the public.
All right. I'm going to call the vote on this, starting with Mr. Lima.
Richard Lima, aye.
Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Pugh.
Before I vote, I do have one comment that just popped into my head. For the food trucks on the beach, since it is related to this, do we have a date for when those are this season? Has that been pushed back because of the parking lot situation?
They're starting on June 22nd.
And is that going to be, because I have heard a little bit from some local restaurants just about the restrictions on regular dining in town for our year-round restaurants. They're they're getting hit with some restrictions that are hurting their business. But then we have food trucks that are coming in that are basically made for a situation like this, which would take away from local restaurants. Most of those food trucks, I think, are out of town. Not all of them, but most of them. Has there been any consideration about that and how that affects the local restaurants in town?
Well, they have existing contracts with us, and to be honest with you, I think that they're all concerned. In fact, we had one drop out. They're all concerned that with the restrictions on non-residents entering our lots until 8 o'clock, that we're concerned about them actually doing business. So we're going to see how it goes starting June 22nd on Mondays and Wednesdays. So they're only Mondays and Wednesdays. We're watching that very carefully. They have their reservations whether they're going to be getting a lot of business. So it's up to our residents and taxpayers to provide them enough business to sustain themselves for the summer season. Because usually there's a lot of traffic in those lots after 5 o'clock, and we are restricting them because of COVID-19 at 8 o'clock this year.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to bring up just in general thought. So it sounds like you guys have thought it through.
They have everybody, no matter you make one good turn and then it affects someone else. So I mean, everybody's affected by this, everybody.
Yeah, I gotcha. All right. So for my vote, Jesse Pugh, aye. Thanks, Steve.
Muller,
I have no questions. Thank you.
All right, I'm just going to read you the vote on this. I'm going to recall the vote. Terry, just for the record, we'll start with Mr. Lima. So this is calling the vote. All in favor, Mr. Lima,
Richard Lima, aye.
Mr. Murray,
Aye. And aye.
Mr. Pugh,
Jesse Pugh, aye.
Ms. Lawler,
Lawler, aye.
Matt Mannix, aye. Motion approved 5-0. Item 13 is a motion to read, pass, and adopt as a second reading the appropriation ordinance for the 2020-2021 fiscal year. Is there a motion?
Bill Lawler, so moved.
Is there a second?
Richard Lima, second.
All right, so on this, we have, if there's any new information from anybody, we're gonna have them come forward. I'm gonna turn it over to the finance director briefly, just to go through with us what's happened between the last meeting and this one regarding the amendments we made for our amended first reading. So Director Spagnoli, please.
Good evening. Thank you. So after implementing the 4 amendments from the first reading, there ended up being an additional savings of $26,831. And this was due because many of the reductions and the amendments we made were around personnel costs and benefits. So once all those were done, like I said, we had $26,831. So the balance was used to replenish the contingency funds that we originally hit for $43,684, bringing that now back up to $283,147, which brought the total operating budget is at the $61,176,312, which is a 0.3% increase over 2019-2020.
All right, I'm going to ask any initial comments from the council, starting with Mr. Lima.
Richard Lima, I have none.
Mr. Murray,
Yes, I will be supporting the budget. I'm just sorry to see the library was cut or reallocated their 400. So I will approve this. Thank you.
Mr. Pugh,
Quick question for you just said it was after the additional cuts, a 0.3% increase, or was it a 3% increase? I just want to make sure I have that.
0.3.
So 0.3%
0.3%
last year. Okay. All right.
And Ms. Lawler.
I have nothing other than to thank again all the department heads for making some really tough choices in a tough time.
And the director talked about how it's a 0.3, that increase she's talking about, that's the overall budget, but that doesn't reflect the tax increase and what some of the increases, because there's decreases in certain aids and everything that goes into that. So the tax increase, that's good, that the budget is higher. Just correct me if I'm wrong, the director, 2.2%, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so and that has different feeders going into it, such as the 1% increase on the school budget, and then other things like that. All right, so with that, I'm going to go to the public. I'm going to ask the moderator if there's anyone from the public who would like to speak.
Currently, we have two from the public. First one, I believe, is Stanley Wojciechowski.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to state your name and address for the record when the moderator, after the moderator selects you. All right, so Stanley.
Yes, my name is Stan Wojciechowski, 1044 Boston Neck Road. Can you hear me?
Welcome, yeah. Welcome.
Okay. I just want to make one last plea, because of this pandemic and the disaster in our finances. I'm so happy that the departments did so much cutting. So I'm not asking any department to cut, but they really did a fantastic job. However, I heard that the surplus is $7 million involved, and I would like us to take part of that, come down to a $5 million surplus, and give us a 0% tax increase. It can be done. Why do we need a $7 million surplus this year? Maybe next year, but this year, now, we need to get rid of this number of surplus for the benefit of the taxpayers. We're in a jam now, and why are you running such a high surplus when we're not building fire stations and police stations? There's no need for go out to bond and have a good interest rate or whatever. So let's postpone any increase until next year. A zero increase. How would that sound? That Narragansett does not increase their taxes for the first time ever, as far as I'm concerned, 25 years that I've been around. I just beg you to try and, why can't you do that this year one time? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there another person? I'm going to ask the moderator.
There is Mary.
All right, please state your name when the moderator selects your name and address for the record, please.
Mary Nato, 10 2nd Street, Narragansett. I was hoping that we could have one last chance to reinstate the library's budget. The budget for $400,000 doesn't even cover the salaries. And although some departments had some slight cuts, there was no departments that were slashed like the library. And the library, trying to service the people of Narragansett during the COVID-19, had the highest level of circulation in the entire state by going in and making all the requests and serving the people of Narragansett, while other towns didn't even try to make an effort on that. And I was just hoping to get folks to reconsider the budget and make it a higher budget for the library, because it just is so punishing to them, and they're not even going to be able to cover their salaries.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else? I'm going to ask the moderator.
There is Jane.
All right, please state your name and address for the record.
Jane, are you there?
We're not hearing you, so you might need to unmute yourself.
Dialing for dollars.
So the speaker, Jane, if you could unmute yourself, then we're still not able to hear you. I'm gonna ask the moderator just to maybe reselect her. Is there some reselection?
I'll try muting and unmuting her again.
Okay.
Jane, are you there? No, nothing.
Sent her a text.
All right, if she's able to come on, I'll encourage her to just chime in if she's able to figure out the technology piece of this. In the meantime, is there anyone else? I'm gonna ask the moderator from the public.
Nobody else.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to final commentary from the council. If there's any final comments from the council members, starting with Mr. Lima.
Bullshit.
Here, hello?
Hello?
Yes.
Now she's unmuted.
Please go
No,
ahead.
I
Please
think you
state
have
your
the wrong
name.
person.
Please state your name and address for the record, if you'd like to speak.
Who are you speaking to? Are you trying to get Jane or I
Yes.
raised my hand?
Would you like to speak? And please state your name and address for the
All right.
record.
My name's Catherine Celeberto, 48 Earls Court.
Okay, go ahead, Catherine.
Okay. I'd like to talk about the budget, specifically the school department budget. Every department has decreased their budget except the school department, from what I can determine. It seems like their ask from the town was $26,669,361 on May 4th, and it's the same ask today. They have cut nothing from what I can see. The increase in the budget over last year is $831,000. They want an extra $264 from the town. I found 600 grand someplace, but the bottom line is this: they've made no attempts to cut anything when every other department has. So, and my other question is about, or I should say comment, I'm not quite sure what's going on with the resource officer. They have a line in their budget, $35,000. That's nowhere near enough to pay for a resource officer for the elementary school. I'm unclear what's going on with that. If somebody could respond.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have the finance director, correct me if I'm wrong, but in our, in the decisions from the amending the first reading, the third school resource officers was one of the things that was eliminated. Is that correct, Director Spagnoli?
The third resource officer, was that the 0.5 person? That was the resource officer.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right, that's not in the budget anymore.
Okay,
And then,
that
the
was
second,
taken from the police department budget, the 0.5. What about the 35,000 you gave to the school department when they're not going to have a resource officer? Shouldn't you take that back?
We didn't give them the 35. That was out of their own budget. We just gave them a partial allocation. They have other funds, not just town funds. And if we're not going to have the resource person, then they wouldn't use that money.
Okay, so, as long as we're straight here, no resource officer for the elementary school, but we still have one in the middle school and one in the high school, correct?
that is correct.
Okay.
And then the second item is the school had a 1.35% increase request that was reduced to 1%. But you're still correct, it is an increase of 1%.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I just failed to see why they are not, joining in here and participating. And they still have that $2.3 million figure in their budget, anticipating they're going to get that money from the state, which I'm going to say right here, I'll take you all to Spain if they get $2.3 million, okay? But anyway, I just want to be clear. We're approving a $26,669,361 appropriation to them. we're not approving their $32 million budget. In other words, we're just committing to the 26 million, correct?
Correct, the allocation. I'm sorry, yeah.
All right, okay, thank you. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Deliberto. Is there anyone else from the public? I'm gonna ask the moderator.
There is Alex.
All right, I'm gonna ask Alex to state his or her name and address for the record.
Hi, it's actually not Alex. We share, it's Susan Amoruso, West Bay Drive. I once again want to say that I support restoring the library budget to the 2018 level of funding, not the drastically reduced 2019 level. I know that Mr. Mannix, Mr. Lima, and Ms. Lawler can't fully appreciate the dedication and support that residents of our town have for the library. You obviously don't feel the pride that was felt by our residents to be the State of Rhode Island winner for the Reader's Digest Nicest Places in America contest 2019. The pride that the library placed in the top 5 voting to choose the top nicest place in America. Considering our size, this was outstanding. The support and voting extended far beyond Rhode Island to get those kind of results. Before the pandemic, I was in Rocks wearing my Love Your Library button. And long story short, in explaining it, a guy next to me asked me about it and I told him, so he had just come from the library, as chance would have it, with his 2 granddaughters after donating some books his mother had written. From reading about our library struggles in the Reader's Digest, Mary Blair Emmel from Indiana and a local author decided that she wanted to show support for the library through donation. This is what people do who want to support free libraries. They realize that no matter what the conditions, librarians will find a way not only to survive, but to flourish as the heart of the community. By passing this budget without, proper funding with such a drastic cut, it just shows that you lack understanding of this concept and the dedication that this library staff continues to feel and the support that is still present after all this time in trying to restore what the bond issue should have ensured is obvious. So I think you should reconsider and restore the library funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? I'm going to ask the moderator from the public.
There is Dr. Alba.
All right, please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, Dr. Al Alba, 24 Eagles Nest Terrace, Narragansett, Rhode Island. As an educator, as an individual who has completed years of schooling, I can attest the importance of having the library have level funding. Also, I feel that we should not take any actions which will preclude OLIS funding that by in any way, shape, or form by lowering the square footage of the original authorization that was approved to the peer marketplace. We all know the cost of ignorance. Ignorance is very costly. And I work at corrections, so I see a lot of people who have not had the opportunity to go to school and get a good education. Also, we have to recognize many people are facing hard times now. The people who can least afford to buy computers or get access to the internet or be able to afford to go out to the movies and to take advantage of all the opportunities to have the vast resources of books and materials that a library affords people. The people who are most needy will be taking advantage and benefiting from the library the most. If you are a millionaire, if you're living in Anawan Cliffs or other areas of Narragansett where you can well afford to buy your own library, your own computer resources, your own iPads, well, those people, sure, they can take care of themselves. But we have to face reality that many people in Narragansett and our surrounding communities need to go to our library to get needed resources so they can better themselves. So I urge all of you to reconsider to have level funding for the library. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm asked the moderator if there's anyone else from the public.
Nobody else.
All right, so I'm just gonna have final comments from the council and before we call the vote. And I'll start with Mr. Lima.
No comments at this time.
Mr. Murray,
Yeah, that $400 from the library is about 8 cents on the budget. So, on the mill rate, so, for the record.
Mr. Pugh,
So I guess I want to state that I appreciate, every department taking a smaller cut, small cut this year under the circumstances. I think that it's not something that if you run a department or if you head a department, you necessarily want to do. But all the department heads did that without complaining. With that said, I can't support the idea of cutting, really targeting a single municipal department over all others, and cutting their budget by higher than 50% over their historical budget. So I won't be supporting the budget, unfortunately. So that's it for me.
Ms. Lawler,
Unmute.
Thank you, Patrick. A couple things. First, they're not a town department. I wish they were for our town manager. Jim, I'd like for you to explain to the town, because I don't know that everybody really understands. You have your town departments and they have a budget and they work with you with the budget. But can you explain about the money that's allocated to the school as well as to the library, how that works, what role the town, what you as the town manager, what role do you play in how that money is used once you cut the check?
I don't have any control over it. Once the appropriation is given to the school department or the library, it's those individual, the board of trustees for the library determines expenditures, purchases, hiring, firing, operation hours. They determine all of that. The town manager has no control over that. And with the school department, the appropriation is given to them and they spend it at the direction of the school committee.
So when you had discussions with your departments, did you also have discussions with the school department and with the library about their budgets? And how did those go if you did?
I did. I started with the school department. I started off with Dr. Cummings, and in initial discussions, the original ask was actually over 1.38 in our discussions. It was not a formal request. And as we talked more about the different items in the budget, the ask from the school department at that point was 1.38, which through further negotiations and discussions came down to 1%, which it currently remains the number prior to this budget being approved. And with the library, I met with them several times back in February. We started fairly early, and myself and Chris Bagnoli, in early February, actually the chair of the board, quote, applauded my interest in library matters. I wanted to understand how it actually operated on a daily basis. That was in early February when she brought that to my attention. And over a roughly 1 month period, a 3-week period, the library did reduce $25,000 from the 21 budget that we're going through right now regarding building repair. In addition, they unfunded some pension contributions to the tune of $30,000. So it was $55,000 in savings. And then we had some other discussions. One was to move some funding from operating to capital regarding the fundraising efforts. But again, the board decides that. They chose not to do that. But they did realize $55,000 worth of savings through those discussions. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
I have something to say. Jim, over the last, I think, several years, they've been level funded at just over 800,000 for the last, I think, 6 or 7 years. So it isn't like all the other top departments go up between 2 and 3% every year. This department has, well, the library has been at a little over 800,000 for the last 6 or 7 years. So I just want to point that out. And then they're cut by 50% in last year's budget and used up their reserve. So I don't know what they're going to do this year.
All right, thank you.
Matt, let me comment on this, please. Now
Go
that
ahead.
everybody jumped in. So what we did is we level funded from last year, 400,000. Olis will give them 177,000, which is $577,000. I explained that they hired a person to fundraise and they took it out of the taxpayer money, out of the budget. That total came to $93,975. Personally, I don't think the taxpayers should be paying for somebody to fundraise for what they call a project, and the project is the Belmont building. So put that money back into the picture and you would be at $670,975. I also stated as a position, not an individual, as a position, it's costing the town an extra $6,000 in a healthcare package that nobody else has. Nobody. All the town departments of 12 would transfer it over to a Blue Cross plan, not United Health. So there's another $6,000 that we've been paying for 12 years. 70-some thousand dollars, 72 to be exact. So if you took the $6,000 and you put that into the equation, now you have $676,975. And let's bring up the one that really puzzles me, and I'm sure it puzzles a lot of the taxpayers in this town. You left $181,000 on the table at Olis because you want to say that you didn't trust anybody. Well, you don't trust the finance director, you don't trust the town manager, then I don't know who you trust. That $181,000 right now, if it was implemented into these figures, would give you $857,975. More than enough to run the library. But as I said before, we don't know what direction we're going in. We don't know how much state funding we're going to get, what we're going to get, if we're going to get any, and we don't know what's in the future for us. But I will say this, last year, we were attacked with, we're going to have to furlough, close the doors, reduce the hours. The library wasn't closed, maybe but one day, as I was told, for snow. So all the gossip of how we're going to close the library and not be able to function didn't happen. And as I said at the first budget hearing, and I'll say it now, we will fund the library. If the library needs funding, we will fund it, but it will be bare bones. Because again, we don't know where we're going to be and what the future is going to be ahead of us. So library is not going to close the door unless they choose to. And if they choose to, that's their decision, but it's not my decision. And I don't think it's this council's decision to close a library. We're just going to be watching this money very carefully. Thank you.
Sounds like a threat to me.
Sounds like that's how you run a business.
All right, Rick.
All right,
You wouldn't know that.
I think, so everyone's, I think, weighed in from the council on their final thoughts. The library allocation this year is the same as last year, so the state aid is going to be is going to be able to be accessed. It's going to be sent this time as opposed to last year when it wasn't. In terms of the history of the town allocation to the budget for the library, 2014, 2015, it was 684, 883. For 2015 to 16, it was 891, 103. 2016, so that's a big jump. It went from 684 to 891. And then for the next 2 years, it was that 841 number that we've been talking about. So as we know, during that time, that's when there was the, that surplus was growing, and why the reform, we had the reform last year of making sure we fixed that problem, because that fund balance was growing and that was taxpayer money. All right, so I'm going to call the vote on this. All in favor, starting with Mr. Lima.
Richard Lima, aye.
Mr. Murray.
Aye.
Mr. Pugh.
Trustee Pugh, no.
Ms. Lawler. Ms. Lawler.
Unmute.
Lawler, aye.
Matt Mannix, aye. Motion approved 4-1. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the finance director for her work on the budget. So the 8 o'clock, I just need, we were a little past 8 o'clock, unfortunately. But at 8 o'clock, we do have a scheduling motion. It's a motion to reschedule a public hearing on the issue of amending Narragansett's harbor management plan, addressing changes to the timeframe for mooring field operations in the South Ferry, Anawan, and Harbor of Refuge fields. Is there a motion?
Jill Lawler, so moved.
Is there a second?
Richard Lima, second.
All right, discussion. This is because this came actually to me from the clerk, and the Harbor Management Commission indicated to her that these items would be ready for hearing on July 20th. So the rescheduling of this will be to July 20th of 2020. Is there any commentary from the council on that? I'll just go quickly through if there is. Mr. Lima.
No comment.
Mr. Murray.
None.
Mr. Pugh.
No comment.
Ms. Lawler.
I have nothing.
All right, so all in favor of the motion to reschedule this item to July 20th, starting with Mr. Lima.
Richard Lima, aye.
Mr. Murray.
Aye.
Mr. Pugh.
Aye.
Ms. Lawler.
Jill Lawler, aye.
Matt Mannix, aye. Motion approved 5-0. Item number 14 is a motion to approve the alterations to the children room for the reopening of the Maury Lungins Memorial Library building in order to keep both library staff and users safe. The alterations will be completed by Abcor Reconstruction Company Incorporated in the amount of $43,730 for fiscal year 2020. Is there a motion?
Jill Lawler, so moved.
Is there a second?
Richard Lima, second.
All right, discussion. This item came from Mr. Pugh and from Ms. Arkwright, the library director. So if one of them would like to speak to the item first.
Yep, I'll speak to it. So this item was really prepared by Patty. She wasn't going to be here, so I let her know that I would go ahead and sponsor it with her so that we could discuss it at the meeting. I do want to mention one thing about the blue sheet on this. Susan Gallagher did not prepare this. So I just want to be on the record to say that it's not prepared by Susan. So if you want to make a note of that, that should just be removed basically from the blue sheet. Susan was not involved. It's just an old template. So I want to be clear about that. For the item itself, there is a reopening library buildings guide from OLIS that outlines specific steps that need to be taken or should be taken in preparation for reopenings. And as part of that, it includes clear pathways to enter and leave the building, cleaning different spaces, widening different areas so that people can get through without touching or getting too close to each other, sneeze guards, those sort of things. So the library has started to put together this plan, and as part of it, what they need to do is install sneeze guards at the various desks, as well as they would like to basically install an exit door in what is currently the children's room. So that will no longer be the children's room. That would be the way that people exit the building, so they're not passing each other too closely through the current entrance. This funding would come from the library capital projects account, and it would be for $43,730 from their fund to cover these expenses. It'll be done by Abcor. So again, this is really in preparation for reopening, and maybe it wouldn't have been an issue in a newer building, but in the current building, it is an issue. So that's the item. All right,
just before going to the council, this item, as you mentioned, Mr. Pugh was not prepared by Susan Gallagher, but it does say on the blue sheet that it was. So there's a process that's gone through when the purchasing manager deals with this. And she indicated that, purchasing manager, that she had not been involved with this. If we look at other items on the agenda, like 8, 9, and 10, she's mentioned to the person preparing those items. So I think if we're going to go through her with the process that she goes through, which is usually the typical way to do it, we probably want to continue this item and have her do that process, because it's a little misleading for us to have it.
Yeah, that's fine. So
Like
actually, I'd like to be extremely cautious with this, especially based on the current violations we've had with open meetings. So why don't we do this? I'm the sponsor of this. I'm going to withdraw this item, fully withdraw it, and this will be resubmitted for next meeting. So I'm going to withdraw this.
All right, so this item's withdrawn. I suggest that the library director meet with the purchasing manager on it. All right, so item 14 is withdrawn. Item 15 is a motion to instruct the town solicitor to prepare, amend an ordinance or ordinances governing student and other short-term rentals in single-family neighborhoods based on the Rhode Island Supreme Court's ruling in Federal Hill Capital LLC versus City of Providence. Is there a motion?
Jill Lawler, so moved.
Is there a second?
Richard Lima, second.
Discussion. This is Mr. Lima's item, so I'm going to turn it over to him first.
So I'd just like to let all the neighborhood groups and the residents in Narragansett be thanked that Providence won its case. And I think this is 25 years overdue that neighborhoods haven't had what we can actually call quiet neighborhoods, being able to enjoy your neighborhood. It's tough unless you live in one of those neighborhoods and actually see what goes on. So I am very happy that the Supreme Court ruled the way they did. That's why I put this on immediately. I put it on so that all council people can voice their opinion about it. And at the bottom of the blue sheet, you will see that my recommendation is that the town council instructs the town solicitor to mirror the language of Providence ordinance. And by doing that, it's already been proven. It's already been to court. So if we go and mirror what Providence has done, I think we're leading into the right direction. I think it's way overdue. And I'm hoping that people of the neighborhoods in our community are in support of this. Thank you.
So there's two options when something like this comes on. You can put an ordinance on, or you can kind of instruct the solicitor. And that's because of this has been going on for so long. This isn't as the five of us will give instructions to the solicitor. The solicitor who's worked on this is Mr. Berg. So I'm actually going to have him bring him in just to go through the legal aspects of this, to go through what the legal ramifications of the Supreme Court decision in this case were. It's that he could summarize for us. I know he's spoken with some of you about it already. He spoke with me about it. And so I'm going to turn it over to him if he's out there, and then we'll go to initial council comments and then to the public. So Mr. Berg.
Thank you, Matt. As you know, our approach ever since some of the cases got dismissed in municipal court in 2016, and the discussion was whether we should appeal our case, was to wait and see what happened with Providence's case. And quite frankly, having read the decision, it couldn't have gone better for us. As Rick noted, not only do we have the option of enacting an identical or similar ordinance to Providence, where we limit the number of college students that can live in a single family home, but there was language in the Supreme Court which would strongly tend to suggest that if the town started enforcing its provision limiting single family homes to 4 unrelated people, that the constitutional arguments that were made before in the ruling by Judge Fortunato back in 1992 would not hold water this time around. In other words, very doubtful that the cases would be dismissed on these constitutional free association grounds. I mean, there are some other defenses that might be raised, but I think the town's got options now. We can start enforcing our unrelated ordinance as it stands now. We can tweak it to make it better, or we can take Rick's suggestion and enact a ordinance that specifically targets college students. I think all of these options will withstand constitutional muster. So they're out there. I think a discussion is definitely in order.
And so the exact language of the city ordinance was no more than 3 college students. Is that correct, Mr. Berg?
That's correct. It was limited to certain neighborhoods in Providence.
Great. Okay, so thank you for that. And we, I know there's other aspects to this. Is there anything else you would like to add on the Supreme Court decision? Mr. Berg?
No, just again, I think it's very broad, and the town has a number of options available to it that we've been looking into and will continue to look into, as well as starting to enforce some of the ordinances we have on the books right now.
Great. All right. Thank you. So, Mr. Lima, in terms of your instruction to the solicitor, you would say let's mimic or mirror the City of Providence's ordinance, correct? As you've already articulated.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Initial commentary from Mr. Murray on that front, and then we're going to circle back around. Go ahead.
I'm good with the 4 unrelated, but I think the front line is URI controlling their students, not the town trying to control human behavior. That's where the fight is. Enforcement of this, I don't think we have the staff to do it. It's going to turn into it's going to be a cluster. But yeah, I mean that's what I feel. So I mean, if URI held their students accountable, in early testimony in 10 years, they haven't even expelled or sanctioned or suspended a student for off-campus behavior. I think these landlords that count on student and summer rentals, certainly as 1/3 of the housing in Narragansett is utilized for that purpose. I think they need to start getting with URI and controlling the students, because this is going to severely restrict landlords' potential for utilizing their property. I was good with 4. I understand a lot of people buy these houses, they work it for a few years, then they retire to them. And I just think it's unfortunate that only, like anything else, 10% of the crowd ruins it for everybody else. So I guess we can, I'm voting for 4, but if you guys want to go with 3, that's okay. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Pugh.
I was glad to see this. Glad to see Providence win this case. I think our town's patience in this matter paid off. We didn't have to expend money and time.
Finally won one.
We won one without doing anything. Yes.
Finally won one.
This case that worked out. I support this. I think I agree with Ricky in terms of modeling it after Providence, or just basically copying Providence is exactly why try to get too complicated with it. I don't think this is going to be a silver bullet for the problems in town. I think there's other things that need to be done to keep attracting families and have real estate that's available to families. But this is something that's good. This is a tool to use, and enforcement can only go so far, but it's something. So I support this, and I'm with Ricky on the way to do it.
Ms. Waller.
Thank you.
Again, I'm extremely happy that this was held up in Providence, and like Jesse, I appreciate the fact that Providence paid for this to happen. This town has been waiting a long time for the ability to take back our town. The amount of phone calls, emails that I've received from people are like, it's time that we can regain our town spirit, our town community once again. I'm just going to give you a quick example of what happened to me this weekend. I have a house next door to me that's a rental property. It's on one of those Airbnbs. And Saturday morning early, about 8 different cars from out of state, college kids came because no one can go to bars these days. They're partying in the houses. And by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I looked out to my neighbors, my new neighbors who just bought a second home. They were out on their porch trying to enjoy it with their 2 young children when highly intoxicated college students yelling and screaming and saying really inappropriate things were out there playing beer bong. That's not the type of neighborhood that I want to have or I want to see. I understand, Patrick, that those things are always going to happen, but we've tried to work with URI since I came to town. I don't know how long ago. It's just not going to happen. URI a long time ago recognized that they could get rid of the problem on campus if they made it a dry campus. So that's what they did. And those kids have come to Narragansett. URI has shown absolutely no interest in wanting to work with the town whatsoever. I hope Carol Stewart's on the call because she has been fighting this probably longer than anybody I know in town. I'm going to stand behind this decision and vote with Jesse and Rick on the 3. Happy to do so. Let's take Narragansett back.
So thank you. We've waited very patiently for this, and we've been really trapped by a Superior Court decision that was never appealed back in the early 90s. And it was a decision that was way out on the left wing, way out of the mainstream. And it was this mentioned specifically. I was able to read the full case again today. That decision was mentioned specifically in this case from Providence. From the state Supreme Court. The state Supreme Court also relied heavily on the Village of Belterre case, which is a pretty famous US Supreme Court case on zoning issues. So, and what that says is basically quality of life can be protected in this way. So very encouraging. We've been very patient. We fought hard for the 4 unrelated. My view is that because the Providence specifically mentioned the three, I would go with the 3 and I would mimic the Providence ordinance because that's what stood up. So that seems to be what many people already are saying. The second puzzle piece, though, that we can't ignore, because if we're talking students instead of 4 unrelated, is we are going to have to address the Airbnb summer problem. So I at least want to throw out there for the council, and we circle back around if there's going to be any direction regarding that to the solicitors. I know that Newport has made some strides there, but I'm not familiar with the real detail on that. So I would say those 2 things would be the things that I would look for in our ordinances: 1, addressing the summer problem, and 1, addressing the student problem. So, and then basically the 4 unrelated, I think we would be essentially moving away from, but not in a bad way, because we'd be going for the Providence ordinance. All right, that being said, I'm going to ask the moderator if there's anyone from the public, and then we're going to circle.
Man, I just want to say one thing.
Go ahead.
If I remember, I might be off here, but I think the 4 unrelated, which was a grand compromise of a couple years ago that everybody agreed to, and now you're switching horses on everybody, but I know at least half of the people in town are going to be happy about it. But anyway, with that aside, I think didn't we limit it to that if you stay 30 days and less, you were exempt from the 3 or 4 unrelated? And
That's a good question. It was quite some time ago.
Yeah, it was a while ago, but I think that was the case.
We'd have to look.
I just wanted to put that out there.
All right. So what I'm going to do is just go to the public, and then I'm going to get direction from the council. I feel there's direction on one front pretty clearly, but let's hear what the public has to say. And then if there's any additional direction, then we'll go from there. So
the hands are up.
The moderator, if he can select the people who would like to speak. If you could state your name and address for the record, and try to be focused in your comments here, because there's a lot of issues. So if you want us to stick with 4 unrelated, if you want us to mimic Providence, if you want us to address things like boarding houses or Airbnb, but try to be succinct and help us, because the more succinct you are, it's going to help us to give our direction to the solicitor. So I'm going to turn to the moderator. And who's our first person?
Stanley Wojciechowski.
All right, Stanley's name and address for the record, please.
Stan Wojciechowski on Lost Neck Road.
Go ahead.
I don't know if you realize it. Really, the chief of police. The police have done a fantastic job of fixing the problems that we had years ago. I think that if you look at the log, there's a lot fewer violations now than there was before. And this is really a police enforcement issue. If we got noise or disruptive people, this is a police issue. You send the police out there to stop the people from yelling and throwing stuff around. This is a police, not a zoning motion or a zoning problem. The police have responded and they've improved it, and we got to let them continue to do this for another few years, and it'll fix the problem without trampling on our rights as property owners. Now, the other issue I didn't know about is this going to affect the summer rental? Are we going to allow only foreign related in the summer also? Or are we just targeting college students? We are allowed to target college students? Have the police show up and demand to know if you're a college student or not? It certainly feels awful discriminatory and the wrong way to go. We fix it. I thought we had a noise sounding issue where we could listen to the noise and figure out if we can charge the people doing it. We should be finding and arresting and going after the people who are making the noise, the people who are drunk. And I would love to see us close down the doggone alcohol suppliers, because they're the cause of this thing, giving the kids the doggone alcohol. I'd like to see the age change to 30 years old. That's what we should do. Stop selling alcohol to anybody lower than 30. I know that's going to be impossible, but this is also targeting the wrong people. You're out there targeting property rights. My right to have people on my property and have armed policemen going out there and checking for whether they are students or not students. Pretty soon I'm going to say, okay, it's not a student, but it's a young person. I had young people who were not students, who are wild or not wild. So I don't know how you're going to define who you're going to target and how you're going to send the police out there, armed police out there, show me your ID. Are you related? This is crazy. Let the police do their job, or let them be a little more aggressive in doing their job for those drunk people. But I want to say, with this these cars now going out there, Uber drivers stop the doggone drunk driving. The students have really found other alternatives so they don't disturb the people around them as much. It's not as serious as it was. There's a big reduction. So let's not be so quick to trample. I just say postpone this thing for at least 6 months to see, to verify. Let's go through the next year of college students and let's see what the results are. I want to see the numbers. What was it last year, the year before, the year before, the year before? Let me see the violation numbers. I was told that they're down significantly. And let that thing work before you take away my rights that have people on my property rights, basic American property rights on what I can do, who can be on there. I have a family that might come and they'll bring in strangers. I'm going to have one related, yet they're family and friends of family, not necessarily college. Now I got to worry about the police coming out there and demanding to see who they are, prove who they are. This is so un-American. I can't stand it. I only have one summer rental, so I don't have a lot in this issue. However, it really bothers me as far as American and property rights you are trampling on when you don't need to, when you have a good police chief who is doing his job and getting better at it. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to ask the moderator who we have next.
Dr. Alba.
Please state your name and address for the record when the moderator selects you, please.
Yes, Dr. Al Alba, 24 Eagles Nest Terrace, Narragansett, Rhode Island, 02882. First of all, I'd like to thank Rick for stepping up to the plate on this. And I'd also like to, the testament that Joe brought forth I'd like to also give her a pat on the back because it's evident that people are ticked off. People in Eastwood, people are leaving our beautiful seaside community because they cannot, because they're frustrated. We have these houses, these huge houses that are built. Somehow they get zoning approval where they have 7, 8, 9 bedrooms. They're like dorm-sized houses. Now, it's just to me, it's just adding fuel to the fire. So I have to, we have to have peace. People have to have peace where they live. Our neighborhoods have to have peace, and they should not have to succumb to these parties and the rude and lewd aspects that Jill just stated. Unfortunately, Stan, it has not gone away. It is out there. People are actually, they've cried at many town council meetings saying, this is insane. We got to get control of our neighborhood. We got to get control of our neighborhood. It's been happening over and over and over again. So I want to applaud you for this. And also for the Airbnbs, same thing. You guys should also look into that if people are basically packing these people into sardines and unrelated parties and it's causing problems, then yes, there should be restrictions on that as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to ask the moderator for the next speaker. Again, I'm going to ask for focus on whether you think we should go forward or we should go forward with the Providence approach or with the forum related approach or something else. So try to be succinct in your comments because we've debated this many times. Okay, so please, if you could help.
Steve is up next.
All right, Steve, say a name and address for the record, please.
Stephen Ferrandi, 44 Sylvan Road, Narragansett, Rhode Island. Thank you, council members. This is a breath of fresh air. Finally, after 25 to 30 years, these neighborhoods may be able to start to breathe again. It's been so disgusting watching the depth of some of these neighborhoods have gone. Eastwood, look where I live, full of predatory investors at this point. The town has been handcuffed to do anything for it, and it's been a shame. I've had to watch elderly get upset at night. Had to watch younger people with families move in and say they can't stand it. They could not believe what was happening in the town of Narragansett. So enough of the drama. We've had enough. It's time for action. Rick, thank you very much, and the rest of the council for doing this. And thank you, Providence, for having the fortitude to stick up for to make sure they don't lose any more single family neighborhoods.
We want 3.
So I say, go with the 3 college students, mirror the image as best as you can legally. That seems to be, I know it's the best aspect. Variate from it. Don't even bring a scintilla of a hint, any kind of a lawsuit with it. Follow it, express your offer, Supreme Court, Rhode Island Supreme Court decision that no one challenged in 25 years except for Providence. So, and I wouldn't accept anything less. If you accept anything less, then you're not for the neighborhood. Outside interests that want to come in and just perforate the neighborhood to make money and take it out. This could help my neighborhood keep hundreds, if not thousands of people. Thousands of people in my neighborhood will be less, So I would make it as clear as concise, mirror the Providence ordinance. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to ask the moderator who's next.
Next is Paul.
All right, please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, Paul Ferrandi, 22 Melville Lane, Narragansett, Rhode Island. I'd like to thank Councilman Lima and Lawler and all the councilmen that seem to want to adopt without moving a decimal point or a period in the Providence ordinance. And I would highly suggest that we adopt this as soon as possible, meaning in 3 readings, adoption, first reading, second reading, and not muddy it up with any other ordinance with Airbnb. I think it needs to be a standalone ordinance, so there's no questions and no delay. We've seen over the 25 years, the shenanigans that have gone on in this town, and I think we have possibly 5 council members that are willing to finally take the interest of the voting residents that live in single-family neighborhoods in and above the many outside financial interests that don't even vote in this town that have dictated the conditions that most of us in town have to live under. It's been an atrocity. I appreciate all.
Oops.
Oh, we lost you. We lost you, Paul.
Let's see if I can find him.
He's muted.
That's a different Paul.
Paul Ferrandi, if you're out there, you fell off. So we're going to try to recall you up. The last thing we heard was atrocity.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes. So, but now I see that you're muted. Now we can't hear you.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so the last thing we heard, Paul, was you said it's an atrocity. That's where you were in your
Yeah,
thought.
I think everybody understands that it's been an atrocity. I want to commend each and every council member that hopefully will vote for this and finally put Narragansett back on the right track. But I would almost implore you, do not mess or fool around with this ordinance by trying to piggyback on anything else, because it's only going to be a typical delay of what we've seen it. Make the decision, get it introduced, get a first reading, second reading, and adoption at the second reading. And then the heavy lifting is going to have to come by changing the paradigm with staff and enforcement. It's not perfect, but it's something that'll set us on a upward trajectory. Thank you very much, council people.
Thank you. Moderator, Mr. Moderator, who's next?
Another Paul's on furlough.
All right, Paul, Mr. Zanfrillo, name and address for the record, please.
Hi, good evening. Paul Zanfrillo, 7 Windward Circle. I believe that we should adopt the Providence ordinance exactly as Paul Ferrandi said, exactly the same. And, you know, we've had enough of compromising. And I just want to say it's not about the URI students. It's not about the investors. It's about the residents. And the residents have always been put last for a generation. And I want to share a little perspective and a little history about why it's 4 right now. That was no compromise. We were instructed by the solicitor at that time that we had to make the no more than 3 significantly different. And so that's why it went to 4. It was in order to get something passed. There was no consensus from the residents about 4 versus about bumping the number to 4. So it's time to adopt the problem, because here's what's going to happen. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lawsuit. It's not going to be the ACLU coming to the rescue now to these landlords. It's going to be, they're going to come. You can guarantee no matter what, there's so much money in this that people are going to come after us. So we need the airtight decision from Providence. So we're on the 1 yard line of some real change. Let's not fumble the ball on the 1 yard line and mess it up. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to ask the moderator who we have next.
Next is Harry Schofield.
All right, Mr. Schofield, name and address, please, for the record.
Yes, Harry Schofield, 9 Atlantic Avenue in Narragansett. And I too want to thank Ricky for putting this on the agenda, and to Jesse and to Matt and to Jill for actively supporting it, and hopefully Patrick, I think, will as well. You know, I'm here tonight representing the Narragansett Peer Residents Association. Since our inception, our membership has been wholeheartedly in support of this. And I think, as most of you know, I chaired the ad hoc subcommittee that, you know, dealt with this issue and put forth the recommendations for the 4 unrelateds that were ultimately approved. Paul Zanfrillo is exactly right. We went with 4 at that time because the solicitor at that time was fearful of it being overturned and wouldn't, you know, hear of a student-related ordinance and wouldn't hear of 3. And we had some council resistance to 3 at that time as well. but we all on the committee wanted 3. Paul is right that most of the residents wanted 3. And this is the best opportunity we've had after 25 years to correct the wrong, as has been said, and finally give Narragansett residents the neighborhood protection they deserve. During the 24 years since that unfortunate decision, which had Matt said, the Rhode Island Supreme Court just criticized as basically poor form for overturning by judicial fiat the legislation of an elected body. At this time, since that time, we've had 24 years of landlords making millions of dollars on the backs of residents. They've done it on the backs of the residents. The residents pay the same taxes they do. That's something else we should change. So all these issues of enforcement, that's a red herring. This can be enforced. There's ways to do it. And by the way, if this starts to turn some of those houses back to family houses, again, residents have taken a big hit. We fully support mirroring the Providence ordinance as the best approach. I would hope you will go ahead and enforce the 4 unrelateds we put together 3 years ago. In the meantime, let's deal with the summer residents, differently, and the Airbnbs. We need to be as airtight as possible. We fully support mirror the Providence ordinance has been suggested and proposed by Rick. Thank you all so much.
All right, thank you. I'm going to ask moderator who's next on the list.
Next is Catherine Ciliberto.
All right, Ms. Ciliberto, name and address, please, for the record.
Catherine Ciliberto, 48 Earls Court. I also want to encourage the council to accept or to craft an ordinance that speaks specifically to the 3 students. We have a litigated decision. It would be ridiculous really to veer from it. The other thing is this, the word unrelated doesn't mean what it meant years ago. It doesn't mean what it meant when this Bell Tier decision was rendered. I always say the 3 little girls across the street from me call me Auntie Kathy. If you were to say to them, but she's not your auntie, they would argue with you because they really believe I'm their auntie because I treat them the way an auntie would treat them. The US Supreme Court just today rendered a decision where they said that gay and LGBT individuals can't be discriminated against. We have new meanings for words now in 2020. And I don't think we should open the Pandora's box of the word unrelated. We need to just stick to the 3 students. It's very specific. And I do want to say something for the people who don't live in town year round and we don't currently vote in town. There's a third of us live in town year round and vote year round. We also do not want this student craziness that goes on. It's at the point where, it's, how can I say? The bottom line is this, that I know that in the end, our assessments may go down or the values of our homes may go down, but to me, it's worth it. It's really worth it to live in a town where families are the focus. And what can I say? I just think that we just should stick with the Providence ordinance. It's very clear. We can craft something very similar. As far as the other issues, Airbnbs and rooming houses and all that all has to be separate ordinances. It's going to be a lot of work, but that's what has to be done. But right now, if we can get this 3 student ordinance on the books, it will be very helpful. Thank you.
Great. I'm going to ask the moderator who we have next.
Next is Keith Carvalho.
All right, Mr. Carvalho, name and address for the record, please.
Sure. Keith Carvalho, 34 Gardenia Lane, Bonnet Shores. Thanks for giving me a platform to speak, and thanks to those members of the council still attentive. Me hearing from the citizens on what I imagine is probably one of the most radical issues that we've had in quite some time as a town. I grew up in Bonnet Shores, born and raised in a rental neighborhood at the top of Bonnet Shores, and I own property there now. I currently live in Philadelphia, and my mission is to bring my family back to Narragansett. The rental property is one of the means that I will do that from. So there's, I'm not like all, but there's still individuals who care about this community and rent properties. I am extremely opposed to the motion that's being brought forward today for a number of reasons. I'll hone in to give everybody else a chance to speak. But for one, there's civil implications in limiting our abilities to provide for our families and to get secure returns on investments we've made. Two is that they're not all bad landlords, all right? You're addressing the symptom with this motion rather than addressing the actual problem. If you truly believe that limiting 3 people versus 4 is going to reduce the number of people and get-togethers that happen in our neighborhoods and the number of disruption that happen in our neighborhoods, you're mistaken. The way to approach that is with conflict resolution within the neighborhoods and with policing on the landlords like me, right, who take pride in their properties and keeping the neighborhood and the community intact and peaceful, and taking measures against the landlords who don't do that. Now, biting off and jumping on the Providence ordinance is probably the easy, convenient, and the cheap thing to do. I understand that, but you're not addressing the issue. You're putting people's livelihoods at risk. You're putting people's financial well-being at risk, and you're turning half of the town against you. So I, for one, as somebody who's strived to get back to the house. In fact, I'm shopping right now in different neighborhoods. Right, that's not a town I'm going to return to, and I've worked 15 years my butt off to get back to Narragansett and get a home and get back to that community. To sit in the town council meeting that with this sort of with this sort of position. So for one, a little bit of a different approach from a community member here, but appreciate the forum and the opportunity to speak.
All right, thank you. I'm gonna ask the moderator who he has next.
Next person is Dee Macia.
All right, I'm gonna ask you to state your name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, this is David Macca, 50 Sylvan Road, Narragansett, Rhode Island. How's everyone doing today?
Good, go ahead.
Excellent. So I'm opposed to the this ordinance that you guys are trying to pass. I've been going to Rhode Island for 50 years. I'm a URI student. I have a rental property. It doesn't fall within your qualifications of 4 bedrooms or more, but I've done my best to shine there. I'm a landlord who's concerned about the impact that I have on the community. I love the state of Rhode Island, and I enjoy going there. My concern is that I believe this is a policing issue. It's a situation where, you know, Rhode Island didn't just show up. They've had students there for many, many years. Some of the people that are in the community moved in within those 25 years, knowing the environment that they moved into. Now, I understand that they don't like it now, but I don't believe that targeting the students of URI is the correct approach to solving this problem. I think providing statistics along with the impact of the real estate market. I understand that some of the people say, I don't care how it impacts me financially if the real estate values go down, but this is going to be a tax burden on the town of Narragansett. And I'm just wondering if an assessment has been done. You know, there are cases across the country like Fort Lauderdale where they ran the students out who are on spring break and they're begging to get them back. Now, statistically, it would be nice to get that information along with the policing impact. And like statistics similar to how many houses will be impacted by this? Does anybody have that information?
1/3 of the houses are summer winter rentals or rentals.
What's a quantity? 1/3 is a percentage.
Yeah, one-third are summer winter rentals. And
How many houses? How many houses?
oh, I don't know, what is it, 25 to 3,000?
3,000.
That's a big range.
What,
2,500 to 3,000 houses are rentals.
Now, the target is the landlords that are renting to students. You're talking about Airbnb. How about all of the houses in the town of Narragansett? Can you do it with 4 people or less for all of the townhouses?
Well, when we discussed this before, that was the compromise, because one group wanted 5, the other wanted 3, 4 was the compromise that I remember, and then it didn't, and people who did summer rentals, if you stayed less than 30 days, they were exempt. That was the ordinance, if I remember correctly.
Patrick, I'm asking.
All right, so excuse me. This is all right. It's comments.
Go ahead, man. Sorry, Matt.
That's okay. No, I mean, we want to have some discussion, but it's hard on this Zoom format. So, if you could wrap up in turn, you're opposed to the restrictions of a 3-student or a 4 unrelated for the reasons you've laid out. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I do have one other question. You're targeting students who rent from URI. How about all of the houses in the town of Narragansett?
So you would like us to look at all houses? Is what you're
Absolutely,
saying?
absolutely. Why would you target? I mean, you were talking about what was her name? Mrs. Jill, I think it was. She was specifically talking about LBG or whatever, targeting specific people. I think that's what you're doing here.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, who do we have next? I'm gonna ask the moderator.
Next, we have Jeff D.
All right, if you could state your name and address for the record, please.
Test.
We hear you.
Okay, this is Jeff Dentler, Village of Point Judith. A couple of things to point out. As Harry pointed out and a few others, yes, the ad hoc committee went for a compromise of 4 unrelated. It lasted for roughly 18 months. The town solicitor, who admitted he had no right to overturn a Superior Court decision in 1992, and he could not do it. So that's why he didn't do it. And then our town sat on doing nothing and allowing rentals to go to 4, 5, and 6 students, uncontrolled, unconditioned. As far as a comment on the police department, I have very specific experience from a captain of the police department where we had a renter come across our property, climb our tree, and try to get on our deck, and was never arrested because we do not have a disturbing the peace or a disturbance ordinance. What we have is tumultuous behavior. If a person's climbed your tree, tries to get on your deck with the intent of getting into your house, which they thought was their rental, and that is not tumultuous behavior, then I quote, don't understand how that's looked at. This past September, we had well over 100 students at a house who brought in porta-johns, had a party. As soon as the police showed up, the underage people grabbed their beers, grabbed their liquor, and started walking and running down the street. There were no arrests. Policing needs to improve its approach on how it addresses this. Maybe we do need a town ordinance, as it had been asked 3 years ago about a disturbing the peace possible ordinance versus tumultuous behavior, which is as subjective as can be. Having been a former police officer, I understand you do not want to take objectivity away from an officer. But when they're standing there, ready to go on your deck, reaching out to go on your deck with the intent of entering your house and do nothing, that's malpractice by the police department. Thank you.
Right, thank you. I'm going to ask the moderator if there's anyone else.
There's nobody else.
All right, so I'm going to get final thoughts from the council. All right, I'm going to get final thoughts from the council. We'll start with Mr. Lima, and here, this is our instruction for the solicitor in terms of what we're looking for in an ordinance. We've kind of stated our initial thoughts and heard from the public. So now, Mr. Lima, what direction you would give to the solicitor so that we can have Mr. Berg and Mr. Davis be able to bring something forward to us in the near future, if that's the pleasure of the council. So I'll start with Mr. Lima.
So as I stated in the blue sheet, I am definitely for mirroring Providence. We should be exactly word for word what they're doing. Let's get that in. Get that moving, get that ball rolling. That's a good phase one. There will be other phases that we'll have to look at with Airbnbs and other rental situations. But I think if we get on this right away, we can get this done in the next few meetings with our readings. And the ball is finally, I would think, in the residents' court for once in 25 years.
All right, Mr. Murray.
Yeah, let's get to an ordinance, have a public hearing, discuss it there.
And what would you like that to look like?
Well, it looks like the majority here wants the 3 unrelated. You know, again, we had the 4 unrelated compromise, and we are a tourist town where, again, we're telling people not to park, not to come, not to this, but I mean, there needs to be a balance. And I think it sits up there at the provost marshal's office there at URI, who need to hold their students responsible. That is where the fight is. I mean, certainly we can pass an ordinance, I understand that, but you don't have the manpower to control it. You just don't have it. You'd have to hire, you know, and the police have been doing a great job with the resources that they have. I mean, we're clearly by this decision, we're in a new phase. So we're just gonna have to work it out. But I think it's gonna force URI to step up. Because if they start having students with no place to live, their roles are gonna go down. So I'm hoping that's the reaction to this. So let's move forward.
So is that for 3 student?
Well, like I said, I'm still entertaining the 4 unrelated because that was what everybody agreed on before. I mean, just because we have a decision from Providence that's 3 unrelated, who the hell wants to go to Providence on vacation this summer? Certainly not I. So.
Fair point. All
That's
right.
where I'm at.
Mr. Pugh.
I'm in support of emulating Providence's ordinance. I don't think there's any reason to complicate this. Let's go ahead with something that's already been upheld and not pull in the Airbnb issue right now. There's other ways to deal with Airbnb. So 3 unrelated, emulating Providence for me.
All right, Ms. Lawler.
Bill, you might be muted.
I'll get the hang of the Zoom thing one day. So I have 3 points to make. The first one is I agree. I'd like to ask that the solicitors use the exact language that Providence used. It's already been litigated. It's there. Let's go ahead and use that. I don't know if we can direct you to this night to do this, but I do agree with the statement that Matt had said earlier about the Airbnb. Certainly, I do not want them to combine together. We don't want to give anybody a reason not to have this move through, but I would like for you to start looking at that and looking at what type of help we could give to the residents. Think about what's going to happen right now with our summer. People are not able to go out to restaurants or to bars, so they're going to be vacationing and they're going to be partying very hardy in our residential neighborhoods. And these are going to be the Airbnbs that will be bringing people in. So we need to really take a hard look at that. And as the last point, we have a new building inspector that is being hired. And this is a good time for this person to come in because there's going to be a lot of change. And the change is a tough thing on a department. So to have a new person have the change, but there are plenty of part-time people that we can hire to help out a building inspector. So, and their fines will help themselves. I mean, we have what, two right now, part-time people that help the building inspector, and there could be more that we need. So don't put up obstacles. I mean, we need to find solutions for this. It's clearly something that the town wants. We heard it from people tonight. I know you've probably heard it from people all week, as I have. Let's figure out how to make this work and how to answer what the town wants. That's it, Matt.
Great. I want to thank Mr. Lima for putting this on and getting this ball rolling for us. The consensus seems to be, and we have waited patiently for this, and we worked really hard on this several years ago. But right now, the consensus seems to be this is directed to Mr. Berg and Mr. Davis to essentially mimic, mirror, emulate, whatever word we want to use, but use the language from the Providence ordinance and bring that forward, I would say, for a public hearing and a first reading as soon as we can. So so this was a motion to instruct the solicitor to that effect. So basically, those instructions I just stated would be basically the structure of the motion. Terry, would you like me to repeat that?
I have it. Thank you.
You have it?
I do.
Okay, so I'm going to ask all in favor of, before that, Mr., is that clear? It's pretty simple, but I just want to make sure, Mr. Berg, you've got that.
I understand.
Awesome, thank you. All right, we're going to call the vote on this. We'll start all in favor with Mr. Lima.
Richard Lima, aye.
Mr. Murray.
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing. This isn't something that we're gonna just roll out and enforce. I mean, leases have been signed for September of this year to go through the academic year for next year. So this is gonna have to be phased in. You know, just put that out there, and I'm sure Andy, Mr. Berg would agree with me. But aye, let's move forward here.
Mr. Pugh.
Good point, Patrick. I also agree with having some sort of grace period as this phases in, but for the vote, I'm an aye.
Ms. Lawler.
As far as the grace period, I did speak with Andy about that today, and he felt that we probably would need to honor leases that are in existence for the fall semester, but we could incorporate it in soon thereafter. So Jill Lawler, aye.
All right, Matt Mannix, aye. Motion approved 5-0. All right, thank you, everyone. Next item is a motion to discuss scheduling and rescheduling of upcoming public hearings in light of the effect of the Rhode Island Supreme Court's ruling in Federal Hill Capital LLC versus City of Providence on the town of Narragansett's 4 unrelated ordinance. Is there a motion?
Jill Lawler, so moved.
Is there a second?
Richard Lima, second.
All right, discussion. I actually put this item on after seeing Mr. Lima's item, and as I look at it, I think the summary is a little bit, you know, I probably went into more detail than I should have in the summary. The bottom line, what I'm looking to do is if there was consensus tonight on instructing the solicitor, then I wanted to basically look at them. We have this meeting on June 29th, which was going to be a public hearing on the bulk zoning amendments. Those bulk zoning amendments were the product of looking at zoning ordinances on size of lot, size of buildings, lot coverage. But that was really a plan B to the something like this Providence ordinance or our 4 or 3 unrelated ordinance. So what I'm asking the council, I put it as a discussion of scheduling and rescheduling, and then we have a motion if we wanted to schedule or reschedule. My sentiment, and I just want to go around the council on this, was I'd like to see what you guys just talked about and the motion that preceded this. That's what I'd like to see on the 29th. And push out the discussions on Airbnb, but also on this bulk zoning, because it's a lot more complicated. And I think we can get the first, you know, kind of get that first thing done. So I just want to see if there's a sentiment to do this. I think there's more of a sense of urgency of getting this through, and then we can go and schedule the bulk zoning stuff later in the summer. We also do still have that problem with the court order that Mr. Berg and Mr. Davis can talk about, that you're all aware of, in which, you know, it's dicey for us to start hearing those bulk zoning issues before we really can have a full public hearing. So let me just go down and see, would you like to put on for the 29th, instead of what's on for the 29th bulk zoning, would council members like to put on the ordinance that would mirror the Providence ordinance with a public hearing at first reading that night? I'll just start with Mr. Lima with initial thoughts, and then we'll go from there.
I'm fine, Matt, with, let's get this Providence ordinance going as fast as we can. If we can schedule this on the 29th, fine. If we have to reschedule the bulk ordinance, because we do have to have public hearings on that, it'll give people also time to, review that once again and look that over real carefully, because again, there's a lot to that. It's size of lots, hardscape, softscape, size of the construction of the structure based on the size of the lot and the formulas. A lot of people are not familiar with it. But I would like to see this particular Providence ordinance going on the 29th, and we can reschedule this other one at another time.
All right, great. Mr. Murray.
Okay, well, I think the two issues are kind of hand in hand. I mean, here we got a moratorium on building of more than 4 bedrooms. So are we gonna alter that to make it more than 3 bedrooms? I mean, I think we need to move forward with both, but I don't think we should be mimicking the 3 unrelated to the bulk zoning. So, but I guess certainly this issue is, when's that, June 29th, Matt?
Yes,
yeah. Right, okay. So, yeah, I mean, this has been a long slog for a lot of people. Carol Stewart, I'm thinking of you. So I guess we can do the 29th. It's okay with me.
All right, Mr. Pugh.
So I would like to see let me make sure I'm not on mute. Okay, I'm not on mute. I'd like to see the bulk zoning stay on the 29th. I'm fine with scheduling the 3 unrelated for any other date, but I don't want to push back this bulk zoning anymore. It's been quite a while already. I mean, we were working on this in the late winter, early spring, I think. There's been a lot of time put into this, and the more we push this back, the less likely we are to deal with it with this council at all, actually, knowing how long these things take. So for me, these are not the same issue. What they do have in common is trying to do something to keep real estate inventory affordable for families. However, the bulk zoning, what it's really doing is stopping these really large 3-story boutique hotel houses that are going, and that's what that does. So for me, the intent of the bulk zoning is to stop, basically what we see, what Uber did to the cab industry is what Airbnb is doing to residential real estate. And it's transforming it, and it's happening here in Narragansett. And we don't want Narragansett, or at least I don't want Narragansett to be like one of these towns in the Jersey Shore where it's just a bunch of, you basically have hotel districts in residential neighborhoods. And that's what this is about. So I want to keep on track, get it done, because it does something different than the 3 unrelated, and not kick it down the road. So I like to see it stay where it is.
Yeah, Matt.
Matt, can I make a comment?
Let's do both.
Matt, I need to speak.
I'm going to have Miss Lawler go ahead.
Thank you. I agree. These are 2 different things. The 3 college students and the bulk zoning are 2 different things. I also spoke with Andy about why we want to potentially move the bulk zoning back. And he's got an answer that, Jesse, I think you need to hear, because I was unaware of it. Andy, could you please explain why?
I'm going to go to Mr. Berg, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Matt. There's currently a court order which basically prevents us from moving the bulk zoning ordinances forward. Now, I did file a motion to amend that order, and it's pending. It hasn't been scheduled. So I think there's some decisions that need to be made regarding the course of the litigation, which probably be best left to an executive session. But right now, as it stands, we cannot have a hearing on the 29th unless the court grants relief from that order.
Okay, that's different.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Because I agree with Jesse. I've done a lot of work on this and I don't want to see it stalled, but I now understand that the court doesn't want us, or the judge is prohibiting us to discuss this right now. I like the idea of having an executive session as soon as possible to understand what's going on there. But so I agree with having the first reading on the 29th. Terry, do you have any dates available that maybe we could put on the calendar, the bulk zoning? Because I'm with Jeff, we need to keep this one rolling. The staff's done a lot of work on it, and I know they're not now. We might have to cancel it in the future, but is there something so that we can have a date?
Just to circle back for a second for what you have instructed the solicitors to do with regard to the Providence decision. The current ordinance that addresses for unrelated, I believe that's covered in the zoning ordinance. So Director DeLuca and the solicitors might be able to speak to that. If that's the root of the amendment, that has very specific timeframes for the amount of advertising that needs to take place before the hearing can take place. So that could not happen on June 29th. If that is the route this kind of thing needs to go. If this is a simple ordinance amendment, as in the traditional code of ordinances, there's a first read and a second read. It's just a different method of development and adoption than a zoning ordinance amendment is in terms of advertising and public hearing. So I have plenty of dates available where we already have stenographers scheduled for the meeting because we have other public hearing issues on agendas. So we have the proposed amendment to the zoning ordinance for recreational vehicles. That's on July 6th. And the public hearing on the harbor management plan is scheduled for July 20th now.
So Terry, if we put the
night.
bulk zoning on July 20th, because the RV seems to be a more in-depth discussion than the harbor from what I'm hearing. If we put on a public hearing on the 29th on the 3, the mimicking province, would you be able to advertise that in time to have a first reading also on the 29th on that?
If I have specific language ready to go for an advertisement before 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, I can get it in the newspaper for Friday the 19th and on Friday the 26th. So there's just two appearances. The first one will not appear 14 days prior to the hearing.
So we'll do a public hearing on the 29th and probably a first reading on the 6th for the 3, if we reschedule this. Would that work?
With the COVID emergency, the newspaper is down to 1 publication per week. And because of their reduction in production staff, the deadline is less forgiving than it used to be to get things published. So if you have a public hearing on June 29th, then really the only opportunity to publicize it in our newspaper of record, which is the Narragansett Times, is the Friday before the hearing, June 26th.
Right, so we wouldn't do a first reading is what I'm saying on the 29th. Could we just do the hearing on the 29th? And then do the first reading on the 6th? And you could put in, because we've scheduled a public hearing on the bulk zoning. It's just the hearing.
Right, but that is an amendment of the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance requires publication at least 14 days and at least twice before a public hearing. So if this is not an amendment to the zoning ordinance, it doesn't have the same public hearing requirements. I'm not sure if you can go ahead and have the public hearing without prior publication.
I gotcha. All right, so you would need, the 10 o'clock deadline, is there any flexibility in that? Like, could we call the newspaper and say, can we get that till 5 o'clock tomorrow? Could we try?
We could try.
Because this is pretty simple. Let me go to Mr. Berg. I mean, Mr. Berg, if you had to mimic the Providence ordinance, could you do it by close of business tomorrow?
Yeah, yes. It's just a matter of where you want to put it, how you want to order it. And apparently no one wants to deviate from it. So I think I could probably do something.
Cut and paste.
By 10 o'clock.
Well, we're gonna have Terry ask for a favor. I mean, sometimes those deadlines are with advertising. You can, if she can call in the morning. I mean, I don't think a ton of people are advertising, so I think we should try. Unless Terry, you think we shouldn't even try?
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
no problem. We'll certainly
Okay.
try.
And because I think if close of business Tuesday, it's a Friday publication. We know their deadline for other stuff is Thursday morning on that paper, so, or Wednesday night. So let's try that. Again, I would not even dream of doing this if we had a big complicated, like if this was a big complicated ordinance, but this is really just finding a home for it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We'll inform the council. Unless you think that's unwise, just speak up if you would prefer that we don't do it on the 29th. You let us know, right? If the newspaper says they can't get it.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will follow
You'll let us
through
know.
on the publication aspect of it.
All right, so we'll make this subject to advertising requirements.
And
How's that sound?
Hey, Matt.
Yeah,
Matt, Mr. DeLuca has his hand up.
yeah, okay. Go ahead, Mr. DeLuca.
Yes, Mr. President, I just want to remind everyone that amendments to the zoning ordinance are required to be referred to the planning board for recommendation.
Go.
And that would effectively lengthen the proposed timeline.
That's right, thank you. So we will do, so let's do this. Then we'll put a motion on the 29th. I'm gonna ask for this, a motion to refer this, to refer a proposed ordinance on mirroring the Providence ordinance regarding student occupancy to a motion to refer that to the planning board for the June 29th meeting. Is there a motion to that effect?
I'll make that motion, Jill Lawler.
Is there a second?
Richard Lima, second.
Mr. Did you get that, Terry? You got that for the 29th, so that'd be the motion. Does that handle that, Mr. DeLuca?
Yeah, I believe so.
Right, so we refer it to the planning board on the 29th, since we know that's a meeting date that's out there right now. Okay, so that's the motion on the table. It's made and seconded. All right, on that front, so this is a scheduling of a motion to refer this item to the planning board for the recommendation. And I'm gonna go to now on that. I know I've had a lot of discussion. It's still just a scheduling item. Is there anyone from the public? I'm gonna ask the moderator.
We have one from the public at Stanley.
All right, Mr. Wojciechowski, name and address for the record, please.
Yes, Stan Wojciechowski on West Neck Road. I just want to, I just want to get clear on it. What the council is doing, what the government is doing is really telling everybody, we don't want summer rentals down here in Narragansett. We don't want that industry here. We don't want those rentals here. And we need to put that message out. Maybe I should send a letter to the editor, to the Providence Journal or something. Please do not come to Narragansett. We are trying to stop summer rentals. We don't want them here. We want to get rid of them here. We don't want you here. Don't come here. This is the message that we need to get out there. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, this is really more about the students than the summer, Stan.
Yes, but it is affecting the rental, the rental situation. The summer rentals is tied in directly with student rentals. Whatever you do to the student rentals is tied into the summer rentals. And at this point here, I see myself losing about $150,000 in value on my one home down there as we reduce the use of that availability to have a summer rental, let's say. I just want to make sure that you're aware of this, and we are losing value, like someone else said, significant value. And we're also getting the message out there, we don't want, the student rental is a summer rental. And so when you say student rental, you mean summer rental. That's what's getting out there. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else? I'm going to ask the moderator.
There is Harry Schofield.
All right, Mr. Schofield, name and address, please.
Yes, Harry Schofield again, 9 Atlantic. I just want to restate in opposition to Stanley there that student rentals have nothing to do with the summer rentals. And that people should be aware that by limiting the student rentals to 3 students, currently the foreign related ordinance that we have, and you're free to enforce tomorrow, as you've already discussed, would affect the summer rentals. Limiting students does not. And so I don't see why anyone would connect them. And again, just to reinforce, landlords have had their way with this town too long. These objections that it's restricting, liberties.
There we go. All right.
We lost him.
A minute.
Somebody gave him the hook.
Wait, there we go. Wait.
Yeah. One more point I want to make, since it's been brought up. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Since it's been brought up that you have to present this to the planning board first, and I remember going through that when we did the foreign relateds. I just want to clarify, for a point of clarification here, while you have to put it, to the planning board, and hopefully the planning board will have the wisdom to approve it. But I want to make it clear, I think even if they don't, you still have the right to elect it if you so desire, irrespective of the planning board decision. Is that true?
Correct. They make a recommendation. Correct.
And you're free to decide whether or not you wish to accept that recommendation or reject it. So I just want to put that on the table so everybody hears it. Again, thank you all for getting this done tonight, and hopefully we all appreciate your efforts to schedule this and get this enacted as quickly as possible. Please enact the 4 in the meantime. Thank you.
I apologize for the oversight on the planning board referral piece of this. So thank you to Mr. DeLuca for bringing that to our attention. The 29th is a meeting that we already have on the docket. So that would be a night that we could have the language that Mr. Berg or Mr. Davis could, bring to us, that we would then refer that to the planning board. We've been motioned to refer that to the planning board, and since the 29th is already on, well, that would be the night we put that on. Is there anyone else from the public? I'm going to ask the moderator.
One more, Steve.
All right. Please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Council. Stephen Ferrandi, 44 Sylvan Road. I just have one observation on the current, the bulk zoning. This is be another integral part of the town's arsenal and some of the ordinances it could use if it's crafted properly. It was vetted out a little bit at the planning board. So I would suggest that, we clear that lawsuit as efficiently as we can, because we're being hampered with changing our own zoning in our own town. I don't know if there's any other towns in the state, have this hampering because of a lawsuit, but I hope we can clear this up as quick as we can, because this would be an integral part of what's to try to help the neighborhoods also with these big mini dormitories that are going on. Everybody knows what's happening on Sylvan Road. I don't have to repeat it. It's very egregious. That's my thoughts. And I believe the bulk, I'm not sure, but I believe that was advertised, maybe not for this particular date. It was advertised for earlier in the year, maybe April. I don't know if that's here or there. Thank you.
All right. Is there anyone else on this item for the public?
There is Paul Zonfrillo's next.
All right. Name and address, please, for the record.
Hi, Paul Zonfrillo, 7 Windward Circle. So are we going to also reschedule the bulk zoning to a date certain? as well as part of this?
Not sure yet, Paul. We're gonna see where we are at the end of the conversation. It looks like we may keep it on if things develop and we can do it, but that doesn't look likely. So let's circle back to that question. I had a July 20th date, but let's see.
So the goal though is to try and get the bulk ordinance rescheduled and do the referral, right? To the planning board.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's what it looks like. And yeah.
Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Yeah. Who else do we have as the moderator?
Next is Armin.
All right, please state your name and address for the record.
Unmute.
Arman, Abrahampur, 72 Kingstown Road. I'd like you to be very clear because it seems like you're talking out of both sides of your mouth between you and Jesse. Are you really going to also pass a motion against Airbnbs or just students? Because if that's so, as a landlord, I have United Way renters willing to rent my place. If that is what you're going to do, I'm just going to rent to United Way renters rather than Airbnb. So clear. Clarity is very important here. Are you going to go after summer rentals for Airbnb also, or you're just hedging your bets?
If nobody's hedging bets, nobody's talking out of both sides of their mouth. We've got the Providence ordinance that we want to look at. The Providence ordinance is that the consensus of the council is to go through that. Unfortunately, we had overlooked the piece that it needs to be referred to the planning board. So that's what we're going to be doing, and that's the priority. Some members of the council have concerns about Airbnbs, but right now the instruction to the solicitor does not include that. But as you heard, several members of the council have concerns about that issue. I was one of them.
Okay.
But right now,
I'd like you to know. I like to know if you're going to after that, because if you are,
listen. Excuse me.
Yes,
we have instruction to the solicitor on the three. All right. The people on the council. One person talked about foreign related. Two people talked about the Airbnbs. Right. There's not a consensus right now on the Airbnb piece of it. Right. I stated my position on it, but that's where I said, because I said if you just use students, you still have the summer problem. But Airbnb, I'm talking about in much more general terms. You seem to be talking about in more specific terms. The bottom line is right now, that's not in the conversation for the short term, but it's something that council members have expressed concerns about and may come up at a future meeting. But right now, the priority is going to be the Providence 3 student ordinance.
okay.
Do you have any further comments? Do you have any further?
Will we hear about those meetings if they're going to come up about Airbnb?
You hear about all the meetings. Okay. They're posted. They're put out there. They are posted on the town council. They're posted at the Secretary of State website. They're posted at the on the town website as well. Okay. So
thank you.
Yeah. So follow closely, please. All right. Do you have any further commentary? All right. Is there someone else? I'm going to ask the moderator if there's somebody else.
We have Dr. Alba.
All right. Name and address for the record, please.
Yes, Dr. Al Alba, 24 Eagles Nest Terrace, Narragansett, Rhode Island, 02882. I want to commend everyone again. I feel we do have to put a stop to this. People have to have peace of mind. 3 people in a house, students, that's fine. And people who want to rent in the summer, that's fine. We don't have to have 4, 5, 6 unrelated students. So just because we're putting a limit, that does not preclude people who want to rent their properties out for the summertime. They'll still be able to do that. They might not be making thousands upon thousands of dollars, through the year, but at least people are going to have peace of mind. They're not going to be driven out of their neighborhoods. And also in regards to the moratorium for these monstrosity houses, I really don't know how that ever got pushed through zoning. It's really a shame when you have these people who've been in their houses for many, many years, who are hardworking. They had ocean views or nice views. They had a nice neighborhood, and then these monstrosities of houses get built, and unfortunately take away their views, take away their privacy. And it's really a sad situation. So I'm glad we're looking into that as well. So I want to applaud all of you tonight, give you all a pat on the back, and I'm very pleased to hear what I've heard. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public? I'm going to ask the moderator.
Nobody else from the public.
Okay, then we're going to circle back with the council. I'm going to first go to the town clerk. I think this essentially is a motion to discuss scheduling and rescheduling. So I think we're going to have two motions. Terry, for the first motion, I could have you read it back to me, or I could read it to you, but this is the motion to schedule for the 29th, to refer to the planning board. Do you want to read that motion back to us, please? How you have that?
So I have it as a motion to refer to the planning board for a recommendation on the June 29th.
Right. All right. So do you want that tighter? Would you like that tighter?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. So we'll be looking for a motion to refer the amendment of our zoning ordinances to reflect the Providence 3 student ordinance to the planning board to be scheduled for June 29th. Is that better?
So the hearing would be on June 29th, or the planning board's?
It can't, no, it's just a motion to refer it to planning. Yeah.
Okay.
So whatever
Okay,
the
so-
language we use for that, I don't have the perfect language. So motion to
Okay.
refer the ordinance amendment on the 3 student ordinance from Providence to the planning board on the evening of June 29th at 6:30 p.m. I think that meeting we scheduled for 6:30 p.m.
That is correct.
You don't need to say 6:30 because we have other items floating around it.
Yes.
So, all right. You got the wording of that motion?
I do.
All right. Thanks for hanging in there. All
Thank
right.
you.
We've got that motion. I'm going to see if someone would like to make that motion.
Jill Lawler, so moved.
Is there a second?
Richard Lima, second.
All right. So this is going to be final comments from the council on that. I'm going to go through everybody. Mr. Lima.
I'm all set. I got it all down.
Mr. Murray.
Yeah, Matt, is that gonna say student or unrelated?
Is student. The consensus from the council was student.
Right.
Mimicking Providence.
Okay, so if you're a non-student, you can pile into a 5-bedroom house?
We're mimicking the Providence. It's not to say we're not going to address other issues, but this is just for this one. The council seemed to want to go that way. I mean, not seemed, the council pretty clearly said they wanted to instruct the solicitor to that effect.
Okay.
That's the way.
I'm
Yeah.
all set with it.
All right, Mr. Pugh. Mr. Pugh.
Yeah, I'm all set with it too. Just to kind of reiterate, the reason why we're going with student is because it's been proven to be legal. So not that we necessarily want to do that, not that that's ideal. It's the easiest way to go, and it's proven as a legal ordinance. So no other comments from me.
All right, Ms. Lawler.
I have no other comments.
All right, so again, for everybody, I know we've repeated ourselves a little bit. This is a motion to refer this to the planning board. With every zoning ordinance, we have to do that. And so this is going to be on, the exact language will be on, so everyone will see what that language is. It's going to be Narragansett's adoption of the Providence, but again, it's just kicking it to planning board. So it will be a process. Those who have been through this before, remember how this went with the 4 unrelated. So we're going to, we'll encourage the planning board to put this at the top of their agenda. Strongly encourage them to do that. But that is where it is. All right. So on this piece of it, I think there'll be 2 motions, but that on the rescheduling piece. But on this piece, all in favor. I'm start with Mr. Lima.
Richard Lima, aye.
Mr. Murray.
Maybe we can have a compromise and do a 3.5 student. Aye.
Mr. Pugh.
Jesse Pugh, aye.
Ms. Lawler.
Jill Lawler, aye.
Matt Mannix, aye. I'm just gonna put out there, is there a motion regarding the bulk zoning rescheduling? Does someone want to make that motion? I think we've discussed it. We can leave it on. So I'll let that up to the council on this piece.
That motion, Matt, to put it to the July 20 date that Terry mentioned.
Okay, do I have a second for that?
Richard Lima, second.
All right, any discussion from the council on that? Any commentary, Mr. Lima?
No, just so that people understand, because there are, you know, the neighborhood groups again, and people have brought this forward. We've got to wait, as our solicitors have commented, that we need to get where we can have an open meeting, hopefully in our chambers, and the public can be invited, and we'll have public comment, and people can give their input. Right now, we're held up, as Andy mentioned. So let's just hang in tight. The first step is so far has been good, and I think the second step will be even better. So I think this will just keep getting better as we go.
Mr. Murray.
All set.
Mr. Pugh.
A couple of questions. So Andy, sorry if I may have missed this. I stepped out for a minute, like 10 minutes ago. When's the last time that the town has checked in with the judge to get kind of an update on where we're at with open meetings and that sort of thing?
We filed a motion to amend the order to allow us to at least consider the bulk zoning amendments. That motion is pending. What needs to be done is to have a hearing scheduled. I haven't done that because of the uncertainty swirling around of whether the council wants to move that forward. Now that the province case came down, again, I would suggest an executive meeting to discuss these issues. But in order for me to get relief, to get it scheduled, probably gonna need 2 weeks. So from the time I get an order from the town council to seek a hearing to amend the motion, it's probably gonna take 2 weeks.
So we need to do a motion for that. Okay.
We need to schedule a hearing. The motion's been filed. But with COVID, the hours are limited. So under normal circumstances, it would take 2 weeks. So there's no guarantees, but I would use that as a working figure.
I think this is the key to the extension of the moratorium was what the judge said that we shouldn't have done in an emergency setting. And so basically the bulk zoning is related to that. Other ordinances, such as what's happened with Providence, are not in that bucket, correct, Mr. Berg? So we can go forward. Now, there's still a problem with public hearings per se, we all understand that, but the bulk zoning flowed from the moratorium, and that's why we have the problem on the bulk zoning.
That's an accurate statement, correct. The order has no effect on any other town business.
Okay, so was the motion that you filed with the amendment, did that state that we would be able to do this through a Zoom meeting?
The order as it's written prevents the town council from doing anything regarding the bulk zoning. The judge has made that clear. She wants this held status quo, and part of that is not taking any action on the zoning amendments.
Yeah, so you said you filed an amendment, right?
Yes. I filed a motion to amend that order to allow consideration, not necessarily enactment, at least to let the process move forward.
Over a Zoom meeting, or would that have to be in person?
The court's conducting a lot. Are you talking about the court hearing?
Correct. No. I'm talking about when we actually consider it. Will that have to be at the chambers, or would that be through Zoom? Because we're not going to be having more than 25 or 50 people in a physical place for a long time. So the idea that is more open.
The motion is to allow the town council to consider it in whatever form it's conducting town business at the time, consistent with the governor's second executive order, which allowed Zoom meetings for town council. So yeah, it could be either a live meeting or a Zoom meeting.
Okay. All right. So that could speed it up if it could be through Zoom. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, Ms. Ball. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's fine. So we're thinking July 20th?
Yes.
Okay.
I have no further comments, Matt.
All right. Anyone from the public? Moderator.
Nobody from the public.
All right, so all in favor of the rescheduling of this item, which is the bulk zoning to July 20th, starting with Mr. Lima,
Richard Lima, aye.
Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Pugh,
Jesse Pugh, aye.
Ms. Lawler,
Jill Lawler, aye.
Matt Mannix, aye. Motion approved 5-0. Terry, you got that?
I do, thank you.
All right, great. All right, so 16 had the 2 items there. Item 17, a motion to amend the existing lease agreement between the town and DSM Peer Realty LLC, subject to the execution of a settlement agreement between Love Your Library Incorporated, Friends of the Narragansett Library Incorporated, Susan Cicilline Bonanno, Winters B. Hames III, and Lori Kelly, collectively the plaintiffs, and DSM Peer Realty LLC, as it pertains solely to DSM Peer Realty LLC as a defendant, and or the court's consent/order. Is there a motion?
Jill Lawler, so moved.
Is there a second?
Richard Lima, second.
All right, discussion. This item comes from our solicitor, Mr. Davis. I'm going to turn it over to him.
Good evening. As you all know, the court has issued a restraining order on the town from doing anything with the property, doing anything that would encumber the property, including limited to selling the property or extending the lease. Therefore, I have had no direct conversation with Pierre Liquor's counsel or the plaintiff's counsel regarding the lease matter. A couple of weeks ago, we had a status conference with the court, and that day or the following day, I received a call from Pierre Liquor's lawyer explaining that he had been discussing with plaintiff's counsel a resolution to allow Pierre Liquors to exit the lawsuit and enter into an extended lease agreement. And of course, that's all subject to town approval. During that conversation, it was my understanding that the parties had agreed to that. Shortly thereafter, the plaintiff's counsel contacted me and made it clear that they did not agree to that. So my understanding on what had been agreed to for an extension of the lease term, as I put forth in this motion, was an error. There is no agreement between the parties. And I think everyone knows here, I don't put matters on. This is the first matter I've ever put on. And so when I learned that and then spoke with Pierre Liquor's counsel today for clarification, I sat back and asked myself, if I was not informed of that, would I have put this motion on? And I certainly wouldn't have put it on without certainly talking to the town council. So in light of the fact that I was I misunderstood and the parties had not agreed to it, I am going to withdraw this motion. I think it's for the party to work that out. I'm happy to work with the town council in executive session to discuss what terms we would eventually agree to, but it's not up to us at this point. So I'm going to withdraw this motion.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Davis. So that moves us on to open forum public comment. So I'm going to ask members of the community to come forward. Please be succinct in your comments regarding any issue facing the town. And I ask people to be succinct in their comments. I guess the one thing I'm just going to say is, based on what I just heard on that withdrawal on that item, I strongly encourage the attorneys for the parties, basically the attorney for the plaintiffs, Matt Oliverio, and the attorney for the Pierre Liquors, which is Jay Gowell, to if they can bring us a written settlement agreement vis-a-vis their their situation, that would be something that we could put on the agenda. So, yeah,
Matt,
did I
Matt.
mischaracterize that?
No, it's a fair point. I did communicate to both plaintiff's counsel and Pure Liquors counsel that going forward, if there's an agreement, it needs to be in writing and it needs to be executed by both parties before I would take it to the council. So thank you for reminding me of that.
All right, so I'm going to go to our moderator and have him go through our people who are looking to speak during public comment open forum.
First person is Mary.
All right, please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, this is Mary Nato, 10 2nd Street, Narragansett. And I hit the button for the referendum number 17, but I will make one comment. I don't understand why we'd ever agree to a rental agreement with Pure Liquors and give them 1,500 square feet for no cost whatsoever, where we are, and also have no cost increase for the lease when we are, taking money away from other departments and, scraping the barrel for budgets. So if you are going to agree to these things, you need to make sure that you're looking out for the best interest of the town and not individual businesses in the pier. That's my comment. I just want to make sure that we're looking out, because that equivalently, that would be giving them a $165,000 gift over 5 years, giving them free rent for 1,500 square feet. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Who's next? Mr. Mesa moderator, who's next?
Stanley.
Mr. Wojciechowski, name and address for the record.
Stan Wojciechowski, I just want to emphasize that there is no vaccine for the virus, and it looks like it's going to be longer than expected before we have a vaccine. Therefore, no old people should gather, and I don't think young people should gather together, especially when they tend to touch and not be too careful on what they're touching and what they're doing. And that brought up the idea of the library opening. It should not happen until there is a vaccine, number one. That's number one. Number two, it sounds like there's a petition out for a vote on the Belmont issue. Certainly, we shouldn't be working on this building when the Belmont building may happen. So we're not going to spend $50,000 playing with this building for naught. And this vaccine, we're going to have a second vaccine. Are we going to have a second virus? Are we going to have a virus in January? So I think we need to stop spending, stop everything. We must stop everything concerning this library issue based on the virus. Until we get a virus vaccine, we should not be putting our children at risk in any building along with the old people. And this may also be concerning the community center. I don't think government should be enticing us old people and or young people to get together, putting us at risk. I think it's more serious than we thought. And I see that we're all wearing less masks, so we don't think it's as serious anymore. But I think government needs to be careful, keep us apart, and therefore hold up on the library until the vaccine for sure. That means next year before we do anything with that. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. I'm going to ask the moderator who we have next.
We have Nancy DiNuccio.
All right, name and address for the record, please.
Nancy DiNuccio, Vanderbilt Drive, Narragansett. I would like to mention that in lieu of the recent court ruling in favor of the voter initiative that was originally introduced on March 18, 2019 to issue the $5.8 million bond for the express purpose of building a new library in the former IGA/Belmont building, that volunteers will be at that IGA Belmont building gathering signatures of registered Narragansett voters on Saturday and Sunday, the 20th and 21st, and next weekend on the 27th and 28th from 10 to 2, utilizing all safety procedures and social distancing. So I encourage people to come on by and sign our petitions, and there will be other locations and other dates posted on Facebook. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you.
That's a trespass on public property. That's town-owned property. So that should not be held. And I'm going to tell the town manager that that needs to be done on private property or somewhere else. That is totally inappropriate and disrespectful of the rule of law. And it shows the behavior of this library mob that has been going on for 2 years. Who's next?
That was cleared by the police chief.
Who's next? Who's next? You're out of order, Mr. Nuccio. Who's next, Mr. Moderator?
Pretty sure. So I heard about that that signature gathering as well. I'm pretty sure that that is actually going to be on Gilbane property. We could look more into that, but I'm pretty sure that this has been covered. And it's
Well,
going to
good.
be.
If you're aligned with Gilbane on it, that's fine. Good. That's wonderful.
I agree with Matt. We can't have these rogue librarians running the streets of Narragansett, by God.
Right.
Go ahead. Yeah, we know. Who's next? I'm gonna ask the moderator.
Next is Jeff Dentler.
Name and address for the record.
Jeff Dentler, Village of Point Judith. We're dealing with an unprecedented local event. It is still not determined whether a woman-owned business will survive the sandwich effect created by a bond which originally did not specify a location or building and a town-owned property. This woman-owned business has maintained employment for others, paid $4,000 per month in rent during another unprecedented medical and financial crisis called COVID. How many local businesses have failed? How many unemployed scenarios are due to the COVID crisis? Recently, local enthusiasts commented and supported small business, but failed to point out this specific scenario. Pier Liquor has survived two significant economic crises. First, the 2008-2009 financial crisis. Second, the current COVID crisis and its financial impact. Are those who highlighted small business willing to support this woman-owned enterprise? The plight of this unprecedented local event is to move or close. The intended consequence is supported by whom? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna ask the moderator who he has next.
Next is Dr. Alba.
Name and address for the record, please.
Yes, Dr. Al Alba, 24 Eagles Nest Terrace, Narragansett, Rhode Island. You know, I'm all for small business. My dad had a small business in Narragansett for many years. You know, I'm very empathetic towards their needs. And I have no problem with Pier Liquors operating status quo as they have the last 14, 15 years, or whatever it might have been. They've been doing very good. We have level funding for the library. We're not increasing funding for them. Well, okay, so Pier Liquors has been making money. So could they have level funding? I don't know. But I'm just saying the whole scenario of us even selling property without it going out for bid, it just makes people very uncertain, you know, what's going on here behind the scene dealings. So that's my one concern. In regards to the library and Stan's comment, maybe we can start building the library and get CARES funding for coronavirus so we can protect the library so that way the kids won't be able to catch the flu and other germs. We'll always have germs in the world, but maybe CARES funding could be applied for our library. We don't know. We can look into that. And one of the things I would be concerned about is the beach. Now, I did go to the beach, you know, and it's a beautiful beach. We love it, but kids are going to be kids. And you have kids gathering, 10, 15 kids on one blanket on top of each other. You know, that could be problematic. So I think when the beach opens up, you know, I know it's open now, but I'm just saying when school gets out there should be some kind of people monitoring those kids on the beach, not only the adolescent, but the college kids, because some of them feel invincible because they're young. So we don't want them to be a haven to spread disease or get disease, because it's only going to take one, and then they're going to go home to their parents or grandparents, and then they're going to be susceptible. So these are the things I want you to consider. Thank you.
Yeah, to that end, I would consider, right, that other inside spaces as well, we shouldn't be having large congregations and 856 people collecting signatures in this never-ending battle that we have, I put out an idea to settle and nobody went for. Who do we have next? I'm gonna ask the moderator.
Harry Schofield.
Mr. Schofield, go ahead. Name and address for the record.
Yes, once again, Harry Schofield at 9 Atlantic Avenue. Two things. First, I just want to extend my agreement and concurrence with Jeff Dentler's comments regarding pier liquors. Having lived in the pier for 44 years, having worked on committees to try to find how to improve the business situation in the pier, to have a successful business like Pier Liquors wedged in between this library quagmire is obscene. And in an area where we've strived to try to get good business, to have a good business, and to have it threatened for reasons that are beyond its control and have nothing to do with it is, in my view, sinful. And so I would just encourage you to do all you can to bring these parties together. And I would encourage the parties to be brought together. And, these people that want to abuse Pier Liquors in favor of a library should step back. And I think when this issue comes up again for public debate, that it should be far more open than the last issue was, or the last, we should have public, dialogue is what we really need in a new updated, library that we don't have, and an open, honest discussion about where and which approach would be the most cost effective for the town and for the people who use the library. I'm not for or against it in one place or another personally, but I resent the manner in which this whole thing has gone off and taken all the air out of this town. But I do sympathize with Pier Liquors. And it's interesting that some of the people who were so pro-Belmont Library are also supposedly business advocates in this town. And any business advocate in this town should be outraged at what the situation Pier Liquors has been put into. And so I just, again, align my comments to Jeff's in that regard. And just one other issue, I want to go back to the student ordinance. And you mentioned earlier, and I've indicated this, it's clear that we can enforce the four unrelateds. I'm just asking the question, when you start enforcing it now, during the time it takes to get the new 3 students ordinance in place? Because there are clearly abuses. And people could relate chapter and verses to where they are. I can tell you there's a raised ranch by the synagogue at the corner of Atlantic Avenue and Narragansett Avenue. And that once was a little lawn, is now a stone parking area. That house has oftentimes so many cars in front of it in the student year that some of them are parked on the sidewalk. They're literally parked overnight on the sidewalk. I've seen traffic jams there because of cars parked on the sidewalk. So there are, there's been, once the 4 unrelateds situation was overturned by the decubulous court, it went wild again. And we know it's not a case of 4. In many cases, it's 8. So please enforce the 4. I guess the question is, will you enforce the 4? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the moderator who we have next.
Next is Lori Kelly.
Name and address for the record.
Lori Kelly, Wildfield Farm Road, Narragansett. First of all, Matt, you are incorrect. I have an email that says, if you are in a public space not impeding the lawful movement of others through the public space, it is a constitutionally protected action. So we will be on the public town of Narragansett sidewalks all around town, as we have been previously, and it has been approved by the police chief. I know you don't think much of his decisions because you're trying to overrule him, but we did go get permissions and say what we were doing. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I feel like we all have our roles to play and we're in the same play over and over again. So first of all, Jill, 3 times, I think in the last month or so, you have said to Jim Tierney.
Direct your comments to the chair.
All right, Mr. Mannix, Jill Lawler for 3 times has said, Mr. Tierney, can you talk to us about how the library budget works? And thank you, Jim Tierney, for accurately conveying how we do speak to the town manager and we do talk to the finance director and town manager. But there's a little thing called the town charter, and I think you're all aware of it. And it gives special abilities to the public schools, which is an educational institution, and public libraries, another educational institution. And once you allocate money, the board of the library and the school committee get to control that money. So that's what's behind Mr. Lima's, slashing our budget down to 400,000, because you can't be convinced that the charter gave this right to someone else. And you don't want to put a door in, or you don't want to fix our roof. You think that you get to say that. It becomes a very political battle by your council. And the educated people of this town value public schools and public libraries, and they respect the charter. The second thing was, shame on you, Ricky Lima, because for the third
Let's remove
time,
the shame on you. I'm tired of the shame on you and the
you
moral.
say it
It's
more
a
than
separate,
anyone,
it's
and I
two
get
separate.
my
I've
say.
never said shame on you to anybody. Excuse
Oh,
me.
really?
Okay. No, I haven't.
Prove that.
I don't think I, well,
So
all right, well,
I
maybe I have. Maybe I have said in the last 7 years
Well,
to
do you
somebody.
think I could
I
speak
try
now?
not to, I try my best to try to keep it on the issues. But with the library people, it's all about, if you don't agree with them, you're morally wrong. And you talk about us as we're not in the best interest of the town, instead of saying it's a difference of opinion. But go forward with your overblown moral rhetoric.
Okay, I think it is reprehensible, if you like that word better.
There you go.
to
See, you
attack
can't help
one-
yourself. You can't help yourself. Go ahead.
To attack one employee of the library for their salary and their health care. It is just horrible for you to continually call out one person. And as a factual thing, which you can check with the finance director, it is not one person on that healthcare. There are, I believe, 17 people on that healthcare in retirement. Some of them might even be firemen. I don't know. But when you single someone out time and time again, you are a bully. And it is about time that that is said back to the council. The third thing is taxpayer money, another one of those Ricky Lima things. If people donate to our library, which is a town municipal library, it goes into a commingled account. If someone gives me $5,000 and the board can spend it on books or special programming, that's not taxpayer money. And you seem to not get that distinction for some reason, or you get it and you just pretend to the town that it's all taxpayer money that we're spending. So again, you have unfunded, or the current saying, defunded the library for no purpose. You give 1% increase to the school budget, which would be nearly what we need to stay operating on our salaries, but there's no talking to you guys. You've already have your talking points, you bring them up constantly. So, and the final thing is, over the last 5 years, our budget has been 841 before it was decreased to 400. It was never 891. Your finance director made a mistake and put 50,000 in an operating budget, which should have been in a capital improvement plan. If you go back 5 years, police, fire, and schools I think they're up over $1 million in each case. I don't know off the top of my head, but go ahead after the library because you wanted to fund us. You don't want us to be on the public sidewalks. You don't want us to put up a sign saying, come to the town council meeting. Yes, I think it deserves a little hyperbole from our side. Thank you so much for your time.
So I'm gonna jump in, Matt, since my name was mentioned here.
No, the personal attacks are fun, aren't they, Rick?
Well, you know, first you gotta get things accurate, right? The accuracy would be, I stated more than once a position. Never stated a person's name. I stated a position. The position of librarian, not a person's name. I'm not after any person. I'm just stating the facts about the positions. So I know you don't want to hear about the facts of the positions, but that's it, the facts of the positions. So yes, the facts of the positions. You want to state about with funding the library. Look, you've had many of opportunity as a library board to come out and give us figures, restricted and unrestricted money. And you've never told the public what the restricted funds are. When you had 900 and some odd thousand in your budget, you had a restricted amount that you're right, that was fundraised. But when did you tell the town people about it? You don't. You choose to close the door and keep everybody.
Excuse me, you're out of order.
I'm speaking. You can come out and say, this is how much restricted fund we have, and this is the unrestricted funds. But you don't choose to do that, and that's fine. I have asked all the town managers that I would sit down with the library board at any point, sit down and discuss restructuring your budget. I see on social media the comments, oh, Mr. Lima, what's he know? He wants to make it a down department. He wants to, that's going to increase salaries. Yes, I think that budget needs to be restructured. I really do. I think it needs to be restructured, and it will cost the taxpayers a little bit more money, but it'll be restructured in a manner that the town manager, library board, and the council will be able to sit down and put a budget together that we actually know where the money is going. Nobody's going to have a piggy bank. Nobody's going to spend money foolish. We are going to tighten up, and we're tightening up on everybody. But you just don't want to do that. You don't want to sit down and restructure. You don't even want to come out and tell people that if we put different plans together, we know up by the community center, you don't want to go there because you can build a $3 to $4 million structure, state of the art, have all new equipment on town property, not pay any fees, cost the taxpayer basically nothing to do that if you got the reimbursement, if OLIS has any money to give out, right? Radiant heat floors, all new high-tech modular equipment that you can control everything with. Yeah, it's about 60 to 70,000 per million per 20 years is what it costs the town to borrow money. So think about it. Boy, for a third of the money, you could build a beautiful state-of-the-art library up by the community center. But no, we don't want that. We want to spend a fortune trying to put a library in a building that's designed for warehouse and supermarket, temperatures of 60 to 64 degrees. We're going to convert that into a 68, 70 degree building. Good luck. Good luck. It's going to cost the town a fortune. You will bury and handcuff the town. Not only do you want 841,000, let's get the other number out there. It's 841 plus the 500,000 more it's going to cost to pay the bond, pay the additional expense of the building. So you're really looking for 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 million a year for 20 years. Lay it out there. Don't be shy with it. Lay it all out there. There it is.
I'm going to ask the moderator who we have next to speak.
Next is Mary.
Mary, name and address for the record, please.
Mary Nadeau, 10 2nd Street, Narragansett, Rhode Island. I just wanted to finish speaking about pure liquors. we support the local businesses. I just think it's, and everyone likes having them the same size that they are. It's just expanding and having the town pay for that extra expansion by not getting the rent, and also taking away from the potential new library building, which was planned. Doesn't make any sense to do that. Thank you. And I would like to have Lori Kelly have more chance to be able to talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Who do we have next, as the moderator?
Next is Paul Zonfrillo.
Name and address, please, for the record.
You're on mute, Paul.
Paul Zonfrillo, 7 Windward Circle. I want to thank the council very much tonight for their positive direction for helping out the neighborhoods. And thank you for trying to do it as quickly as you possibly can. And just a quick note on the library. You know, I think you can have, you know, as far as the consultant's report goes, it was originally done in 2012 and updated in 2016. And the numbers they used were based on the census. And, you know, we've got another census coming out in a few months because 25%, I don't know if it was exactly 25%, a big chunk of the library was dedicated to students, because the way the census works is that on April 1st, wherever you're living, you get counted for the census. So, you know, there are no national standards for the size of libraries. So you could very easily give Pure Liquor the extra room and negotiate with OLIS if that's what you wanted to do. I mean, and the other thing is, I think the taxpayers have to realize that we're probably going to be on the hook for the whole thing. You know, people aren't thinking about this in a post-COVID way. The state's broke, right? That OLIS money is not promised to us at all. The state is broke, has reduced our aid. So we have to really reimagine this. And so we're actually arguing a 2010 argument in 2020. You know, a lot of the assumptions are out the window, completely out the window. And so I do think that needs to be taken into account before we do anything. And the studies and that work probably needs to be updated and redone. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna ask the moderator. I think there's someone else.
There is Catherine Ciliberto.
Miss, name and address, please, for the record.
Catherine Ciliberto, 48 Earls Court. I'd like to speak about 2 issues. The first one is the town council's decision not to add 2 firefighters. 2 firefighters would have increased the staff that's on the street at any given time, but also would have cut down on overtime costs. But just let me quickly tell you a little story. My husband was on the Providence Fire Department for 36 years. I asked him once, I said, did you ever have a death at any fire you were in command of? He said, no. And so I said to him, I said, was it skill? He said, no. I said, luck? He said, no. I said, what was it then? He said, manpower. Manpower saves lives. And I want you to think about that in relation to the number of fire deaths we've had in this town. We've had a number of fire deaths. The rate is higher than any other community in the state. The second thing I want to talk about is the targeting of Jill Lawler by Taft Carter. I was at all the hearings involving Matthew Riley's revocation of his pension. The town council appoints only 2 members of the pension board to try to argue in some way that it was her statement that influenced an entire pension board. Only 2, again, of people on that board that the town council appoints was absurd. What happened here was this, and I know Mr. Penza, he's a very, very good attorney. He's an expert in pension law, employee rights, the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights. He doesn't speak to me anymore after this Matthew Riley situation, considering how outspoken I've been. But the fact of the matter is that when you have these type of hearings, His job was to go before the pension board and to try to present mitigating factors, to try to prevent the pension board from taking his whole pension. I've sat in a number of these hearings, so I know how they work. I also was a hearing officer for the state, so I know how these things go, these administrative hearings. Bottom line was, he had no defense of Mr. Riley, so what he did was he attacked the process. And I don't quite sure how this happened, but the fact of the matter is, I feel he spun a tale for the court. He had due process, Mr. Riley. He had Mr. Penza there every step of the way. He had a hearing. He was allowed to speak his mind. If he wanted to, he could have asked for a continuance and habeas Mr. Riley in so he could have spoke for himself. There are so many things in this decision that I just totally confused me. But bottom line is, I believe he decided to attack the process because he had no defense of Mr. Riley, and that was the point of the hearing. Did he commit these acts while he was a police officer? And in fact, he did, as evidenced by the fact that he's in jail. So I really believe that the town has to appeal this decision. It's very important that they do so. We cannot be on the hook for $2.2 million plus from Mr. Riley's pension. We cannot give a sex offender a pension, and that's all there is to it. We really have to continue with this. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna ask the moderator if there's anyone else.
There is Meg Rogers.
Name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Meg Rogers, 68 Earls Court. I just wanted to ask you, Council President, the night that you were voted in as the Town Council President, you asserted that you were the only person that knew Robert's rules. You were the only attorney, and you were the person that could do the job as the Council President. And you were unwilling to wait on a vote until Councilor Pugh could come back in the council due to the fact that he was away with his family. And, you know, as reminded of your remarks, when all of these adverse rulings have recently come out through the Attorney General and the courts in the last 10 days, because it's been a very rough week for Narragansett. First, a couple of weeks ago, we had the publicity stunt of your COVID-19 resolution, which made us the laughingstock of the state. Second of all, we had the decorum resolution of Councilor Lawler that was quickly pulled because the ACLU spoke up about the breaching of people's First Amendment rights, and that went nowhere. Third, we've had multiple Open Meetings Act violations, and now we've had the finding where the plaintiff's motion for summary judgment was granted in Kent County Superior Court this week, and the town's motion for summary judgment was denied. So I was wondering, Council President, under your stewardship, we've had, oh, and I believe the lawsuit up in Colonel John Gardner's Road may have been either dismissed or the town prevailed on that, on the assessments for the folks up on Colonel John Gardner. So we've had a number of adverse court rulings, Open Meetings Act violations, and I'm wondering why you felt that you were the person who could steward the town through all of these legal entanglements. It's really worrisome. Second of all, I heard Councilor Lawler tonight say again that, hi Jill, I see you smiling.
I always love hearing from you, Meg.
I'm glad to bring a smile to your face, Councilor, during this time of COVID-19. I heard you.
Yeah, you've learned nothing during coronavirus, obviously, but go ahead.
How would you know that, Matt?
You clearly haven't. Go ahead.
I thought you were supposed to address the audience during an open forum, Matt.
Go ahead.
But you're the only attorney, you would know that. Anyway, I heard.
I have an answer to your question too.
I beg your pardon?
I said I have an answer to your question too. Go ahead.
Well, you're not supposed to reply during the public forum section of the meeting. Isn't that what's in the charter? There's no back and forth. Didn't you give us a tutorial
Go ahead.
multiple times?
Clearly go ahead, Meg.
Yeah, you did give that
Go ahead,
tutorial.
go ahead.
Okay,
Go
thank
ahead.
you.
You're omniscient, we know, go ahead.
No, Matt, only God is omniscient. That's what we believe. You know that. You know better than that.
Good.
And you didn't even go to a Jesuit school, and you know that. Anyway, I heard Councilor Lawler speak tonight about the fact that the town library is not a town department. Well, that is a difference without a distinction, because as we all know, the people that work for the public library receive a check, and that check is issued and signed by the town of Narragansett. So I would ask, please don't insult our intelligence by that assertion that the library is not part of the town, because it's a specious argument and it falls flat. And I want to commend Mr. Lima for finally telling the truth tonight, because I only wish that he had delivered that diatribe during 2018 when he was running for office. And then we all would have known that he actually opposed the library being built at the Belmont that was expressed through the wishes of the 68% of the people. But tragically, he didn't have the ability to be candid with the voters at that time. So thank you. Good job, everyone.
Wonderful. I'll comment since my name was mentioned, but it's 67%, 67 point some percent voted for a bond. I don't know where you people come up with 68%, 67% voted for the Belmont building. And at the election, Meg, you should know of all people, because you're at every one, you know, with your, what have you been here, 14 years, driving for your Dorchester ways of changing the government of Narragansett. So people maybe don't want your change, Meg. You haven't been here long enough. And my name was not on vote for the Belmont, vote for the Belmont. My name wasn't on that sign, as everybody knows. They know it wasn't. And as you ran up to people to tell them, vote for these people, the election occurred. And the election is what it stands now. Now, I have told people before, you have me on board with doing something with a library. It's just not an affordable thing to do in the Belmont building. We can either do existing, or we can look into a location that the town already owns. And we can do that for a lot less money, a lot less money. 400 and some to $500,000, plus you want an 841 budget on top of that, 1.3 million out of the taxpayers' money pocket for the next 20 years, when we just cut 2 point some million out of a budget, and most of those cuts were needs, kicked down the road for years and years. Look at the roads, look at the sidewalks, look at the structures of some of the buildings, look at town hall. I mean, town stuff needs to be done first. And with all that money that the library had extra, they should have been looking to maintain their building. You know the old saying, Meg, you get a bicycle, you take care of it, you get another one. Well, you got to maintain the building. Now you leave it up to us and the taxpayers to put more money into something that wasn't maintained. Well, maybe we should do an RFP on that existed building, get that out as fast as possible, and do all the upgrades that are needed to put a library in the pier at that location, where, by the way, Reader's Digest said, perfect place. They won an award. So let's put the building where the award is. Bring the trophy down, and we'll actually put a trophy right in the showcase, right there where it is now. That's where it belongs. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna ask the moderator who we have next.
Matt.
Oh, I do have one comment, though. The recent decision by the judge in Superior Court letting this initiative go forward, which essentially hamstrings and shows a misunderstanding of municipal law. I have every intent to vote to appeal that decision. And I think in the state of Rhode Island, I think it's interesting that the plaintiff in that decision, his brother is one of 2 congressmen in the state. Right, we've seen what happens in this state time and again. Who do we have next, Mr. Moderator?
Matt,
Oh, Jill, yes, you were commented on too. Go ahead.
I just wanted to respond to my friend Meg Rogers on a couple of things. First, the decorum motion, I never pulled that motion. What happened is I put a motion on because the council chamber had gotten quite heated. There was no civility, no respect. If you didn't agree with someone, you got hissed at, you got screamed at. So I put a motion on to try to make it so people could have opposing views and be respectful. I never pulled it. The motion was voted down, but I did not pull that motion. I must also say I had a colleague at the council that was on a talk show to talk about it. And no one ever asked me why I put it on. I didn't put it on to stop anyone's free speech, none whatsoever. I put it on so that we can disagree civilly. The other point that I wanted to make about Mrs. Rogers' comments just now, just because the library uses our finance director to issue checks, that doesn't make him a department. That's really, really stretching it, Meg. But good to see you. Glad to have you out tonight.
All right, I'm going to ask the moderator if there's another speaker.
There is Jennifer Armstrong.
Name and address, please, for the record.
Unmute, Jennifer. There you go.
Jennifer Armstrong, 49 Montauk Road.
Welcome, we can hear you.
Hi. Well, my original question was just going to be about, the safety of the beach. There's a lot of concern not seeing people following protocol and not seeing it be enforced. Understanding that, the beach is town property and should be enforced by the town for the safety of the residents. Just looking as to, is there a plan intact as to who will be enforcing, the safety of the beach and the social distancing?
Yeah, so actually we've gotten some complaints, and I talked with the Parks and Rec director today about the beach, and so we're going to be looking at what the numbers were in terms of comparing the 2 different weeks in June right now. So the point is well taken that we have heard from different people on the issues that you're talking about. So I'm going to talk to the town manager, Parks and Rec director about addressing that.
Is it something that possibly, could be kept up on, as an agenda item? Just the safety in general. I feel like as, we're in new unprecedented times with COVID, and it is the summer. And I do think we have to, take it under advisement that, there are rules being set by the CDC and such, and that, we should really try to follow them. And then just the other thing, I mean, that was the only reason I stayed on the call for so long, to speak, just because of the safety of our residents and primarily my family. But listening to the back and forth on the public forum is a bit disconcerting for somebody new to these meetings. I mean, I got to be honest with you. I've lived here for 11 years. I'm starting to become more interested in how money is spent in the town and within the schools, because I have 2 little ones that are attending Narragansett schools, which we absolutely love. But not once when either side was talking about the library, did anybody even talk about the children? I mean, coming into this argument from not a historical perspective at all, I think at this point it's public agenda against public agenda. And I think moving forward, if you had a clear set of eyes looking at it and the purpose as to why you need, a newer, updated library, then maybe we would actually get somewhere, and maybe we could save money doing it. I just think from an outside perspective, we need to really start looking for solutions instead of going back and forth. I don't think we're getting anywhere going back and forth. So, and like I say, earlier when all 5 of you seemed like you already knew that you were going to vote on an issue earlier, it passed. We go through to the next issue. But I mean, at this point, I really think you guys need to come to the table and look at what's really needed and actually try to have a conversation that's going to get somewhere. So I appreciate being able to speak tonight.
Of course, thank you. Is there anyone else? I'm going to ask the moderator.
There is, Alex.
Please go ahead, name and address for the record.
Hi, this is Susan Amoruso, West Bay Drive. I wasn't going to speak, but I just like to straighten out. There seems to be some misunderstanding about the Reader's Digest Nicest Places in America contest. It was not won by the building. Okay, I think we have to be perfectly clear on that. So maybe some people need to do some research on that. But actually, in the contest description, you know, that was the story, the narrative, it said you would pass by the Narragansett Library building and not even notice it because they said nondescript and small. So that's not what was the winner. The contest was about what people in your community show acts of kindness. That's what it was about. It's not an award for the physical layout of the building. The award and the voting took place in a response to voters nationwide, and there were people that voted all over the country for us, obviously so, because we came in the top 5. It was for the staff. It was for how do they go up and beyond? How do they work within this tiny building? What kind of programs? How do they go the extra mile for residents in this town? And staying open during the pandemic, that is one example of how the staff goes beyond. So this award had nothing to do with this quote unquote perfect building. Because as the previous caller just was talking about the kids in this town, yeah, we lose sight of that. The children's room legally holds 15 kids. And for a town of 16,000 people, that is a shame. You can't have a story hour in there. You can't have anything because it's too small. And where do we put our value as a town? And for all this talk about like we need a state-of-art library, I've heard that before, but where is this plan for this state-of-art building? You've had all these years to come up as a town council with another plan. And the Library Commission has been working on this issue for 10 years. Did they look at the community center? Yes. Did they look at by the elementary school? Yes. Did they look at land where the old pool was? Yes. That was bought with funds, so we can't build on that. All these things were looked at, and for people who are new in the town or people who have been here for a while, I didn't realize all the time and effort that had gone into searching for a place in this town. I had no idea until I started hearing about this controversy a couple of years ago. I went to a meeting and my eyes were truly open because there were 2 council people there that said they didn't have to talk to the group. They didn't have to respond to any questions. And that's where my interest really peaked. And that's why I've become so involved. But I do want to say that this award was given to the library staff, and those are the people that we should be so proud of. It is nothing to do with the physical layout of the building. So I just wanted to make that perfectly clear, because a lot of times something's said by people on the council and it's like, okay, they know. Well, for this one issue, that is how it is. I nominated it. I went through the whole vetting process with the Reader's Digest, and they are still following our struggle. So this is not something that they've forgotten about. And it's too bad that we don't realize the gem, the effort that our staff puts through. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. I'm going to ask the moderator if there's anyone else.
We have Mary's last one.
All right. Name and address for the record, please.
All right, thank you. Mary Nato, 10 2nd Street, Narragansett, Rhode Island.
Unmute, Mary.
Sorry, I was unmuted for a second, so sorry, I apologize. I'll start over again. Mary Nato, 10 2nd Street, Narragansett, Rhode Island. Just for people that are not familiar with it, the Tiverton Library was built probably somewhere 5 to 10 years ago at a cost of $12 million. And so I know when the library board was looking at locations and costs, they were looking for the lowest cost alternative. So theirs is built near athletic fields. So for comparison, 12 million to 15 million is what theirs is probably worth now, at 15 million or so. So just to FYI, that's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Matt, I'd like to use my time for open forum as well.
Go ahead.
Thank you, appreciate it. On to a couple maybe more positive notes. Listening to some of these comments, it does seem like there may be this narrative or this storyline that some people in the council do not support Pure Liquor as a business, and we don't support the future of that business. That is not accurate. So I just want to state publicly, in case this isn't clear in any way. Personally, I do support a long-term lease for the Pure Liquor. I've stated this almost a year and a half ago, very early on, that I wanted to take them out of the library project and make sure they were secure in their current space. That's still my position. I do support a long-term lease for them. I'm not in favor of cutting into the Belmont building because I think we do need that space for the library and for any reimbursement, but any sort of creative way to add space to the exterior is something that would be interesting. So again, I'm not going to get too deep into it, but the idea that anyone on this council, as far as I know, wants Pure Liquor to go out of business is not true. And that's not true for me either. And they're aware of that as well. So hopefully that idea gets more out there. It's not about the library versus Pure Liquor. At least that's not for me. On another subject, in town on June 7th, so that was 2 Sundays ago, there was a peaceful protest for Black Lives Matter. It was held by the seawall in town, by the gazebo and along the seawall. It was organized by two young women in town, Lexia Mitchell and Kylie Sackle. I did attend that. There was a lot of people I knew there, a lot of neighbors. I saw the town manager there. I saw the police chief there, as well as other officers in town. It was well attended, about 300 people attending that, as well as people driving by, participating in a drive-by sort of parade type thing. It was good to see. It was good to see that sort of thing take place in a small town where people might not think, racism exists, where people might think racial equality is not so much an issue. And I was proud to see that younger generation take the lead there and attempt to do something that my generation and generations before me have not been able to do. I'd also like to say that the police officers who attended did participate as well. So when there was a moment of silence, 8 minutes of silence, I saw police officers kneeling down and participating as well. I saw the peace symbol from officers. It was a very good, peaceful, well-intended event. And to be honest, growing up in Narragansett, that was probably one of the most proud moments I've had as a resident of Narragansett. So I just wanted to, I guess, bring that up, mention that, thank the organizers and the people that attended. So I thought it was really well done. Thanks.
Yeah, Matt, I'd like to pipe in too here. We covered a bunch of ground there and I've been here for the whole thing. As far as the library goes, That location has been vetted. Other locations were too expensive. I wanted it, me and Rinaldi wanted it up at the Munford School. The building's empty. We saved $2 million. We own the building. But Matt, you voted to put it in the pier, only to defund it later. So one can only deduce you use the library train to get reelected, only to defund the library later and keep it where it is, which is not truthful. So it's been vetted. The numbers that we had cost 8 cents per thousand. So, a $600,000 house would pay $48 a year for the next 20 years. $300,000 house, $24 per year for the next 20 years. That was the cost. Okay, now all this has been vetted. And there's only 2 buildings that met the criteria. The Belmont, granted, it's a supermarket. Supermarkets carry shelves with product on it. Libraries carry shelves with books on it. You need the high PSI cement floors to support the weight of the book, just like a supermarket. That's why that location, plus the centralized, the pier location was perfect. So, and at no time, check the tape, did I ever want the pier liquors to move. That has been a misnomer. Why would we move them? They're paying 14% of the CAM charge, which equates to about $36,000 to $38,000 a year, which pays the total CAM charge that we had charged by the current owners, Gilbane, which is under contract to sell, but that's not going to sell until Narragansett solves this library question. So we had a plan. This council came in, changed their minds. Some weren't truthful about how they felt about the library, or there's miscommunication. And we have a building that's been sitting there that we're heating and cooling, and this is something that should have moved forward. And after all the lawsuits and everything said, in this council's zeal to save money for the town, it's going to cost us money. The same statement I made before the election. So it's been vetted, and people support it. People support the liquor store. I think there is a compromise there. I think we can push out on the loading dock. There's room in that loading dock to utilize that space to make pier liquors operational, so they can offload trucks, so they can have a more smooth operation. So there is a compromise there. So I have no problem for a long-term lease. I don't want to chase them out. The only thing I ever suggested, if they wanted to move to the old library, we could have accommodated them there.
They don't want to.
Well, whatever, then that's fine, then they can stay. But nobody's forcing them, nobody's pushing them. These are all rhetoric that was thrown out there, the gin up, the anti-library, or what have you. And it's pretty sad everything turned political like that. And people will say, well, I didn't know we had 68% of the bond. No bond for a library has ever been that high in the state of Rhode Island. So for people to vote for it and say, well, I didn't know it was going in the Belmont. Well, maybe you should be paying attention, you know? Maybe that's how I got elected. They didn't know they were voting for me. So, and that's all I got to say. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. I'm just going to say, Mr. Murray and Mr. Pugh, I don't think that you want pier liquors to move or against pier liquors. I haven't expressed that to you or to anyone else. It's the plaintiffs who are strangling them. They have control of it, and as you saw, the item was withdrawn tonight unexpectedly because the plaintiffs won't come to the table to even allow them to stay in that space. So is there a motion to adjourn?
Bill Lawler, so moved.
Is there a
Richard
second?
Lima, second.
All in favor, we'll go down, start with Mr. Lima.
Richard Lima, aye.
Mr. Muller.
Aye, please.
Mr. Pugh,
Aye.
Ms. Lawler.
Lawler, aye.
Matt Mannix, aye. Thank you everyone for hanging in there. Have a wonderful night and stay
Welcome to
safe.
go.
Take care.